Hello everyone. We start tonight by entering a medieval castle's resonant stone hallways. You can practically hear the wind's soft whistling, slipping through the gaps in the massive wooden doors as the candles flicker around the walls. It's the type of location that appears romantic to tourists. However, you would likely regret it within the first hour if you had to live here, particularly on a winter's night. The truth is straightforward. It was frigid in castles. You would quickly realize that opposing knights weren't your worst adversary if you were forced to sleep inside one without insulated windows, central heating, or even a good mattress by today's standards. The cold was the cause. Most likely, you won't make it through this, not without a few tricks anyhow. If you truly love what I do here, please take a time to like and subscribe to the video before you settle in. Additionally, if you're listening at the moment, leave a comment with your location and the local time. I find it fascinating to see where others are watching from across the globe. Now turn down the lights, relax your breathing, and visualize yourself getting ready for bed in a fortress from the Middle Ages. You drag your boots on the flagstone floors of a large room, which have been smoothed by centuries of foot traffic. Even with all of your clothes on, the cold still stings your flesh. Warmth is completely absorbed by the stone walls rather than only being resisted. Castles are rarely referred to as marvels of luxury by historians, but they are frequently described as marvels of defense. Here is the unvarnished truth. Like a gigantic refrigerator, the sturdy walls that could withstand a battering ram also held in chilly air. The temperature inside fell nearly as rapidly as the outdoors once the sun set. In front of your face, you would see clouds formed by your breath. Inside, the air is dank, thick, and unwelcoming. Castles weren't built to keep the cold out. They were built to keep enemies out. The architects considered moats, drawbridges, and arrow slits, but they didn't actually include insulation in their plans. Many castles in Northern Europe were positioned advantageously on windy hills, which is a common characteristic worth keeping in mind. That was amazing from a military perspective. The slopes provided you with a defensive edge and allowed you to notice approaching invaders. However, it was a curse from the standpoint of someone who was attempting to sleep. Every surface was swept by the wind, which also created chilly drafts behind doors and via openings in shutters. It would be impossible to find a worse place to sleep. The fires won't save you, despite what you might believe. The small circle around it was hardly warmed by even the big hall's raging fire, and it got colder the farther you were from the fire. The temperature could seem more like a basement than a living room by the time you padded over to your sleeping chamber. Here's a strange fact now. Travelers described the shock of frost developing within castle beds in certain late medieval chronicles. Imagine finding the wash basin frozen solid or seeing icicles dangling from your bed curtains when you wake up. This was considered nearly typical among chroniclers, not worthy of more than a brief notice. You were in the minority if there wasn't a thin coating of poetry growing on the walls of your chamber in January. However, individuals managed to live in spite of this. They managed to prevent their bodies from turning into popsicles in some way. Ritual was part of that survival instinct. Whole homes moved in patterns designed to retain as much warmth as possible when night fell. Despite the castle's size, the goal was always to reduce the living area at night. They banked fires, draped mattresses, layered clothing until movement became a secondary issue, and prayed that the draft wouldn't be too harsh. Imagine yourself entering a bedroom from the Middle Ages. The bed itself is a striking example of carpentry that is elevated above the ground. It was not for show. It was a tactic to get out of the coldest, always sinking layer of air. Nevertheless, as soon as you go beneath the covers, your body senses the coolness radiating from the stone. Historians continue to debate whether the stories of a happy, noble life were embellished by subsequent storytellers, or whether castles actually become more comfortable over the course of centuries. According to some, heavy curtains and tapestries really made homes cozier. Others maintain that regardless of how much cloth was put on the walls, the cold always prevailed. Most likely the middle is where the reality is. Although there was some improvement, it was never comfortable. The straw-stitched blanket rustles beneath you as you recline in this imagined bed, the wooden frame groaning. The wind outside groans against the fortifications. The sole source of light is a little oil lamp that hangs over the bedside, and even that seems to be fighting for its life. Even though you're still wearing your everyday clothing, the intense cold is already starting to hurt your toes. Then the noises of a night from a castle come in. As a guard switches watch, the sound of boots on stone can be heard in the distance. The rafters stream beneath the frost. In the courtyard, a dog barks softly, its voice muted by the wall's thickness. Somewhere nearby, you may even hear the sound of frozen water dripping. It doesn't make you feel any warmer. Rather, it serves as a reminder of how harsh the outside world can be. It is easy to think that while peasants shivered in their huts, the nobles were cozy. Here's the amusing part, though. The peasants had it better at times. Their wooden and door-built houses may be more effective at retaining heat from the hearth than the enormous, expansive chambers of a lord's fortress, and complete family could stay quite warm in a tiny cabin with only one fire. You, a nobleman in a castle, on the other hand, might shiver in a stone box so big that it wouldn't be affected by 5 roaring stoves. Contemporaries were aware of this irony. A few letters that have survived from priests and aristocratic guests mention how hard it is to sleep well in castles in the cold. They say the nights are harsh, but the beds are lovely. Some even suggest that tourists bring additional cloaks not for display, but for survival. You start to realize how resourceful it must have been to survive the night as you keep seeing yourself resting there. Instead of just hiding beneath a cover and hoping for the best, you took action. You drew curtains tight, stacked furs, layered materials, and occasionally even shared your bed with other people or animals. Every stage included establishing microclimates, small pockets of warmth in a setting that was intended to be consistently frigid by architecture and nature. Your perspective on medieval existence is altered by the encounter. They were more than simply soldiers, lords, maidens, and monks. They were survivalists. Every winter was a struggle, every nighttime a test, and sleep, which we now take for granted, had to be meticulously planned using customs handed down through the ancestors. Imagine the joy of hot stones placed next to your beds, the surprising comfort of a dog on your feet, the little success of keeping frost off your beard during the night, and the gratitude you would feel for every glimmer of warmth. You would remember these occasions far more clearly than any hunt or dinner. The experience of survival was unforgettable. Therefore, When you sleep in your contemporary bed tonight, with your central heating humming pleasantly, you may think of people who used to lie freezing in stone chambers. They persevered despite their long nights and cold mornings. They managed to sleep in areas that weren't supposed to be inhabited. Layer by layer, trick after trick. This novel will take you farther into the medieval night and continue to explore that creativity. Now you enter the Great Hall, which is the center of each medieval castle. At least there are hints of warmth here, even if the bedchamber was a mausoleum of stone and draughts. Numerous elbows and tankers have polished the wooden surfaces of the long trestle tables that span the floor. Roasted meat, spilled ale, damp wool, and smoke that never quite makes it out of the rafters permeate the air. A bold square of orange heat against the gathering winter gloom. The fire in the middle hearth roars loudly. After dusk, the castle felt most vibrant here. In addition to gathering for food, people came here to take in as much warmth as they could before withdrawing to their chilly quarters. Great platters of sizzling pottage, jugs of ale, and trenchers of bread are carried by servants as they dart back and forth. With their tails wagging, dogs scavenge underfoot in search of leftovers. The clattering of knives on plates, singing, and laughter fill the auditorium to an almost rock-like volume. You temporarily forget that ice is building on the windows as the wind screams across the battlements outside. Here's the simple truth. In most castles, the only room where heating was even remotely effective was the Great Hall. The room's center or end was dominated by a massive open fireplace, which was fed nearly continuously during the winter. To keep it going, logs, sometimes whole tree trunks, were carried in. While slaves or less fortunate people shivered along the perimeter, those with rank took a seat close to it and basked in that golden warmth. This is the catch, though. The heat only went so far, even in this magnificent space. The air grew colder the further you sat from the fires, until it seemed as if the walls themselves were exhaling frost. As people on the floor crowded together and wrapped themselves in cloaks, heat crept higher, trapped in the smoke-stained rafters. In reality, everyone pretended to be warm, but only a fortunate few were ever warm. The fact that feasts occasionally served as calculated heating sessions is one oddity that chroniclers bring out. Knowing that the fire and the body heat of hundreds of people would make the huge hall almost comfortable, nobles planned their biggest parties for the cold months. According to other stories, servants were even instructed to stand closer to one another only to provide more warmth. One may argue that feasting was just as much for survival as it was about having fun. However, the hall's radiance was short-lived. The visitors stumbled off to their beds as the feast came to an end, and the minstrels put up their instruments. Eventually, the fire was let to burn low. The embers burned crimson. Shadows lengthened on the stone walls like a final defense against the cold. The fire you clung to in the evening rapidly faded. The huge hall itself would return to icy quiet in an hour or two. Now picture yourself stretching your hands to absorb every last bit of warmth. You're lingering by the fire, hesitant to go. The rear of your body is already feeling the chill, reminding you of what's upstairs, even if your cheeks are glowing hot. Even though the smoke clings to your hair and irritates your eyes, you still fear having to ascend the spiral staircase to your chamber. Whether certain castles created more advanced heating systems for their large halls is still up for dispute among historians. Some contend that the circulation of warmth was made possible by vents and flue, particularly in later eras. Others argue that this is unrealistic, pointing out that comfort was not a top priority for medieval construction technology. The harsher truth is more widely accepted. Only the area where the fire was located was warm in the large hall. Even the acoustics served as a reminder that this was a vast palace of power rather than a comfortable lodge. The soundscape itself appeared too big and too chilly as every chuckle reverberated and every stride was magnified. And as the hall grew empty, the quiet grew unbearable, like sitting in a sleeping giant's belly. The changeover itself is among the most revealing pictures. The stroll from your bedroom to the main hall. Imagine stepping out of the golden firelight, entering a small hallway with just one torch. You are immediately hit by the draft. Through open doors and arrow holes, a knife of frigid air rushed. Once more, your breath becomes hazy. It feels like the castle itself is consuming the warmth you just carried in your bones. That transition from one room of fleeting solace to the never-ending cold outside of clearly defined medieval nights. Nobles would occasionally spend so much time in the great hall that they would almost sleep there. Servants or guards frequently slumped near the embers rather than facing their apartments, and a high-backed seat dragged close to the hearth may be used as an improvised bed. Even if sleeping close to the fire meant running the danger of sparks, smoke, and unruly noise, it was nonetheless alluring in contrast to the cold stone above. Another interesting observation from the documents. The trip from the Great Hall to the sleeping quarters was frequently the subject of more complaints from travelers than the actual sleep. It was said that the body was shocked by the sudden change in temperature from warm to chilly. People talked about that stroll, giving them goosebumps all night long. You feel as though the castle itself is punishing you for even considering the possibility of comfort. The hall's waning radiance was also psychological. You were aware that the night would be harsh and lengthy once you left it behind. There was more to the huge hall than a chamber. Before giving way to the cold, it was a ritual, a gathering of warmth. Every cup empty and torch extinguished was a step closer to a terrifying encounter in bed. You can see how fleeting the comfort was, even in the flickering light of the candles. With flames exploding and fading, the once roaring fire now murmurs softly. A servant gives it a half-hearted prod before giving up and letting the coals go out. The moans of the castle as it settles into the night have taken the place of the sound of laughing and feasting. With your cloak snugly wrapped around you and the memory of warmth diminishing with every step, you turn unwillingly to mount that stairway. The radiance of the huge hall clings to your memory like a wishful dream. Your fingers ache, your toes are already numb, and you know that the remainder of the night will be a struggle for warmth. People were kept sane by that ephemeral brightness, the custom of assembling, dining, and enjoying the firelight before the winter returned. The fortress would have been intolerable without the vast hall. If only for a few hours, it gave folks a chance to at least recall what warmth felt like. The air instantly changes as you ascend more inside the keep, away from the great hall's waning light. A wet chill that clings to your bones has taken the place of the fire's warmth. The walls are much thicker than those seen in contemporary homes. There are moments when you feel cut off from the outer world by 12 feet of stone. That sounds like protection at first. Here's the irony, though. The cold was confined behind the same walls that halted siege engines and arrows. You are familiar with the feeling if you have ever entered a basement during the winter months. Even when the outside air momentarily warms, the stone radiates cold because it retains the temperature like a memory. The walls became contradictory because medieval builders understood strength and durability, but not comfort. Not against the elements, but against men, fortresses. Historians concur that castles never warmed more than a small area around the hearth. Just 10 feet distant, you found yourself back in an icebox as a fire flared and smoke curled skyward. Noble households are described as sitting right in front of the flames in written reports from the 13th and 14th centuries. In order to maintain circulation, servants behind them stomped their feet as cloaks were pulled over their heads. A bubble of bearable heat was produced by the fire, but the stone surrounding it resisted. Now, a fascinating observation from the records of travelers. The walls themselves perspired, according to several complaints. Chambers became wet and uncomfortable as moisture formed on the cold stone and trickled down in streaks. Imagine spending the entire night in bed and listening to little droplets striking the floor next to you. Not the precise lullaby you were hoping for. Moss even sprouted on the inner surfaces during certain seasons. Yes, you lived in a castle, but sometimes it seemed more like a cave. The subject of whether tapestries and hangings actually made much of a difference continues to be debated by contemporary academics. We envision opulent walls covered in intricately woven textiles. But did those substantial materials actually provide insulation, or were they just decorative? According to some researchers, they significantly reduced drafts, resulting in warm spots behind the draperies. Others believe that subsequent romanticized portrayals overstated this, pointing out that even the finest fabric couldn't match the frigid air that filtered through door openings and unglazed windows. The argument remains unsolved, but it makes one thing very evident. People tried nearly everything because they were so desperate. Now visualize it. In late January, you walk inside a bedroom. The hearth's fire is modest and may already be guttering. Around you, the walls rise like cliffs, their surfaces covered in layers of wool and sticky with dampness. You shudder. With thick curtains pulled around it, the bed stands tall in the middle. The chamber feels like a stone tomb outside, yet the air may be a few degrees warmer inside those curtains, a little cocoon cut out of the cold. The impact on the mind was as severe. More people commented about how they dreaded the cold than hunger or even sickness. Hunger and sickness gradually went, at least. Throughout the whole winter, the cold remained unrelenting. Living in a castle made it impossible to leave. That feeling of being trapped in your own house left a lasting impression. Imagine listening to the hiss of wind slipping between arrow holes while you lie there, drawing the coverlet close. The cold burns in your ears. Your fingers become rigid. When you do have dreams, they are plagued with visions of fire and ice. The stone walls enclose you like a refrigerator that never shuts off, rather than a barrier of protection. This is the point at when your viewpoint changes. In everyday life, castles weren't glamorous. Yes, they were survival machines, but the protection came at a cost. Security came at the expense of comfort. Each cold night served as a reminder that while stone could protect you from shafts, it could never keep you warm. It becomes more apparent the more you consider it. Sleeping in a medieval castle was more about waging a little fight against the environment than it was about relaxing in peace. The opponent was ruthless while being unseen. Additionally, the battlefield remained constant. Your body, your bed, your chamber. Instead of polished wood or carpets, the floor of the chamber is covered in rushes scattered across the stone, and your boots crunch against something far more modest. These weren't only ornaments, they were a realistic attempt to absorb spills, reduce the coldness underfoot, and above all serve as a rudimentary kind of insulation. Households replenished the rushes a few times a year, stacking them thick in regal halls and apartments according to documents from the later Middle Ages. They had a subtle, almost pleasant, grassy, earthy scent when they were first deposited. You may feel as though a portion of summer has been brought inside for a little period of time. The plants helped retain what little warmth could be trapped close to the ground, provided cushioning and masked footfall. However, the enchantment was short-lived. The rushes became nasty over time. Food fragments, wine spills, and stray bones from the feast got stuck within. Insects and mice used the floor as a play area. You should reconsider your vision of a warm, natural carpet. One French moralist observed that it was like sleeping in a midden, since the rushes may be so dirty by the end of winter. You find it amazing how these surges perform double duty. Indeed, they retained a small amount of heat, but they also took in moisture from the wet stone. This was important in a castle because moisture dripped from the walls all the time. Otherwise, there would have been puddles of icy water and slippery stone everywhere you stepped. Some English family reports have an odd afterthought. Occasionally, among the rushes, herbs like meadow, lavender, or rosemary were scattered. It was a somewhat pragmatic concept. In addition to masking the stench of rotting waste, strong-smelling plants added a hint of warmth to otherwise wet and smoke-filled quarters. Imagine getting into bed and behind the overpowering smell of wood smoke and damp wool, picking up a subtle hint of lavender. It might make the night a bit more tolerable, but it wouldn't make you warmer. The effectiveness of these rushes is still up for dispute among architectural historians. Some contend that by forming an insulating mat between human feet and frigid stone, they really offered warmth. Others reject them as primarily symbolic acts of cleanliness and order, pointing out that walls and ceilings were the main source of heat loss. In any case, there is conflicting data, raising the question of whether the rushes were a genuine medieval warming method or merely an untidy habit masquerading as tradition. As a servant finishes dispersing fresh rushes across the room, you imagine yourself laying in bed. As they are crushed underfoot, they crunch gently and emit subtle scents. For a brief instant, the space seems more tidy, even refined. However, you are aware that the rushes will have absorbed the moisture by morning and the cycle of deterioration will resume. Imagine the bedroom's sensory overload. You may feel the coziness of fur or wool under your covers. However, the bitter taste of herbs, the musty scent of old rushes, and the pervasive smoke that sticks to your clothing are all rising around you. Mice scramble over the floor, searching for crumbs. Every little thing serves as a reminder that your sleep was dictated by survival rather than leisure. However, it also has a certain amount of inventiveness. To survive the harsh winter, these people made tools out of the most basic materials, plants they collected from fields and riverbanks, They didn't consider insulation or carpeting. They considered what they might do to keep the cold a little bit farther away. You therefore understand that even the floor beneath you was a part of the nocturnal struggle against the cold as you lay your head in this imagined room. The adversary was stone, rushes while holding a brittle shield. How long until these two betrayed you with dampness and decay? Was the question that started each morning. Now, you sit on the side of the bed and brush your fingertips over the layers of cloth that are heaped high. Fabric was the key to surviving the night chill in the Middle Ages. The preferred weapons were wool, linen, and fur, which were piled and wrapped until you looked more like a cocoon than a sleeper. The importance of textiles in medieval life is evident from household inventory records. Though far less insulating than what came on top, linen sheets were regarded as the standard since they were cool and silky on the skin. Then came heavy blankets made of wool, so heavy that some people said they weighed as much as a dog. Fur collares, foxes, sables, or even bears were added if you were wealthy. Not just for display, but since cold evenings might be deadly without it, nobles spent thousands on such bedding. In the sources, however, is a humorous observation. It was a common joke among servants that once their lords were tucked in, they were immobile. They were fastened down by so many layers that it took a tremendous amount of work to turn them over. Imagine being wrapped up in 5 or 6 thick blankets that are so closely tucked in that you have to either lie motionless or run the danger of freezing if you rip the covers off. Most were prepared to give up mobility in exchange for warmth. Particular care should be given to fur. It was actually useful, going beyond luxury. Dense warmth came from sheepkin, marten skins, and Arctic fox pelts. According to one chronicler, a noble woman in Burgundy was afraid of becoming cold at night and would not travel without her bed linens laced with iron, even in the summer. It may seem ridiculous to us, but in a time when drafts cut through every space, being afraid of the cold made perfect sense. In certain homes, an odd tradition develops. Because linen was assumed to take away the body's heat, some people felt that sleeping under too much linen was harmful. They purposefully placed wool or fur above and below to counterbalance this, resulting in what may be called a textile sandwich. Fur was supposed to trap it all in, while wool heated and linen cooled. Although the theory's scientific viability is questionable, it illustrates how individuals combined legend with comforting practicality. The societal significance of these fabrics is still a mystery to academics. Was fur primarily a prestige symbol, or was it genuinely about survival? On the one hand, inventories demonstrate that the nobility amassed vast quantities of fur collets. However, impoverished households managed without them by using coarse wool. While some historians contend that furs were essentially status and power symbols, others insist that they were an essential component in drafty castles. Most likely, the reality was somewhere in the middle. They served as status symbols as well as life-saving instruments. Imagine yourself now behind these layers. The wool is harsher than contemporary fabrics and itches slightly on your skin. The fur feels heavy and somewhat oppressive above that point, but at least it keeps the cold at away. The weight of the blankets forces you into the straw mattress. You move, but not much. Larger movements would allow chilly air to enter the cocoon. The area surrounding your face is warmed by your breath. The room's stillness intensifies every feeling, while the rest of you are totally dependent on the fabric barrier. The slight musky smell of animal pelts, the rustling of linen, and the rough scratch of wool. It has a personal and primordial quality. The natural world's skins and fibers envelop you. Every hair and thread serves as a reminder that using the environment as armor is essential to survive. And the core of medieval sleep is contained in that concept. To rest was to construct a fortress inside a stronghold, using blankets and furs instead of battlements and mows. You used whatever materials you could find to protect yourself from the cold each night. Even the most majestic castle room would feel like a crypt without them. Thus, you start to comprehend the nighttime pattern as you lie there in your imagined cocoon. Assemble layers, put on weight, and pray they last till dawn. Even if the cold may rattle the shutters, seep through the stones, and whirl around your bed, you had a chance inside the fabric stronghold. More than just a piece of furniture, the bed itself was. The machine's purpose was to make a tiny, habitable space in a hostile room. You are not only seeing into someone's personal bedroom when you pull back the thick curtains of a medieval poster. You are entering a survival-oriented micro-world. The significance of these magnificent beds is demonstrated by thorough inventory from aristocratic homes. These frameworks, carved from wood or walnut, soared off the ground, tall as a person, in contrast to the plain pallets of the peasantry. The posts, which were frequently adorned with elaborate decorations, supported a canopy by standing like pillars. That canopy had a functional as well as aesthetic purpose. You locked your body heat inside by hanging drapes along the sides. It transformed a cold room into something vaguely comfortable. Imagine it as a tent from the Middle Ages in your bedroom. The contrast may be striking once the curtain was drawn. The heat from the heavy bedding, your body, and your breath all accumulated in a drafty environment that may be slightly warmer than freezing. The difference between a terrible night and something bearable may be those few additional degrees. A French duchess is known to have traveled with her bed disassembled and loaded into carts. Why make the effort? For the bed was more than just a piece of furniture. Life support was in place. You ran the risk of shivering all night long if you slept at a strange castle or monastery without your own canopy and drapes. In certain English texts, an interesting detail appears. To better prevent drafts, the curtains themselves were occasionally lined with oiled linen or waxed. Just picture closing those curtains. The cloth was hefty and had a little resin or beeswax scent. They did more than only keep the cold out. Additionally, they produced gloom by obstructing light and sound, creating the appearance of solitude in spaces that were rarely actually secluded. Scholars now continue to debate the effectiveness of these beds. Did they actually provide warmth to sleepers, or do romanticized portrayals of them overstate their utility? There is reason to think that the curtains were effective, since archaeological evidence indicates that they were thick and layered. However, some contend that the warmth was more psychological than physical. That is, it was a sense of enclosure, protection, and concealment from the bitter cold. Although there is still disagreement, it seems undeniable that people valued movable beds so highly that they became a noble need. Imagine yourself falling into one now. Your weight causes the bed to creak. The mattress made of straw rustles. Then you reach out and draw the curtain shut. The air feels different right away. Yes, it was still chilly, but the drafts from the arrow slits were no longer attacking. Your breath becomes less hazy. You feel as though you could truly go asleep as your body settles beneath the thick sheets. The slight trickle of water from the walls, the distant cough of a servant in the corridor, and even the yelp of a dog outside are all muffled by the curtain. Its inside has a reassuring, somewhat musky scent of fur and cotton. When you shift, the only sound you hear is the rustle of your covers. The room beyond may be enormous and hostile. However, you've created a haven of survival against the weather right here in your bed. It was not infallible. On certain nights, the drapes where moisture gathered froze solid. On other nights, you were choked awake by the smoke that floated in from the hearth. However, the four-poster canopy bed was the finest protection from the overnight cold for the majority of nobility. This is when you discover that the medieval people's inventiveness was demonstrated through little deft adjustments rather than large-scale innovations. No central heating? Create a private climate bubble after that, not insulated. After that, close yourself off by hanging heavy drapes. The canopy bed was the closest thing to a ceasefire, and every night was a negotiation with the cold. Now picture yourself resting there. Your eyes are heavy, and the world beyond the curtain is quieting down. Even if the castle is still drafty and the room is still frigid, you've created an environment that makes survival seem feasible. You fall asleep because you've outwitted the night just enough with wood and cloth, not because it's become warmer. Even with all of those drapes and blankets, the mattress remained the cornerstone of your sleep. Whether you slept well or woke up sore, freezing, and irritable might depend on what was beneath you. There were numerous different types of bedding during the Middle Ages, but two stood out: the straw tick and the feather bed. The luxurious option was the feather bed. Imagine burying yourself in a soft, supple bag filled with duck or goose feathers that will warm your body. Numerous feather beds that are meticulously kept and transported with the family whenever the Lord travels are frequently included in inventories from great estates. A well-stuffed feather mattress, a bouncing cushion in an otherwise harsh room, maybe so thick that one sat almost a foot over the bed frame. They were cherished, guarded, and inherited by families as priceless assets. They were more than just cozy. They served as status symbols. Here's a twist, though. Even in the cold, feather mattresses might get oppressively hot, retaining body heat until people woke up soaked in perspiration. In a 15th century letter, a guest bemoaned that his host's bed had engulfed him like a goose in a pot. This hilarious complaint has survived. If you had too many feathers, you sunk too far and spent the night trying to crawl back to the surface rather than sleeping comfortably. For the majority of people, however, the reality was a straw ticker big bag stuffed with hay, straw, or reeds until it resembled a rudimentary mattress. They were utilized by peasants, warriors, and even castles, who stocked their lower rooms with them. They were somewhat effective at elevating you off the cold floor, inexpensive, and simple to reload. However, straw has drawbacks of its own. It pushed through the fabric, flattened rapidly, and frequently carried fleas. To fluff the bed and keep rodents away, households had to shake and hammer the straw sack on a regular basis. Straw scratches may cause your body to itch by morning, but at least you made it through the night. According to modern sources, there is an odd detail. Some folks added herbs on the straw to keep bugs away, in addition to making it smell better. One may add lavender, mint, or pennyroyal, leaving behind a subtle scent that covered over the unpleasant smell of wet hay. If you've ever slept on a mattress filled with straw, you are aware that the odor never really goes away. Earthy and musty, it lingers and seeps into hair and clothing. The actual frequency of feather bedding is still up for discussion among researchers. Some contend that these were uncommon extravagances only available to the highest classes of society. Others cite documents that indicate at least one feather bed was owned by middling households, indicating that they were more common than previously thought. The dispute is based on conflicting facts, but it does show that sleeping surfaces are important enough to be carefully documented. Imagine yourself in a drafty room, resting down on a straw tick. Uneven lumps push on your spine as the sack rustles underneath you. Every shift emits a whiff of grassy aroma tinged with a hint of herbaceous acridness. Somewhere among the rushes on the floor, you hear the small scamper of mice, and you wonder whether they will come visit you. The straw below serves as a reminder that comfort in this era was never assured, even though the blankets above feel thick. Imagine the alternative, a feather bed in a chamber of nobility. Your body is engulfed by down as you go deeply into the softness. It is wonderful until the heat becomes oppressive. You roll into a hollow that holds you a bit too firmly as the feathers move. In an attempt to get some fresh air, you push at the covers, but the drapes keep everything in. Knowing that this discomfort is still 1,000 times better than straw, you go back asleep. The medieval social hierarchy was reflected in the decision between straw and feathers. Lying on feathers was a sign of luxury. To accept necessity was to sleep on straw. However, both were solutions to the same problem, keeping the body alive in harsh, frigid stone rooms. Thus, you discover that medieval sleepers were never passive as you go asleep in your made-up bed tonight. Regardless of its size, each mattress symbolized work, flexibility, and a minor triumph over the cold. You didn't just fall asleep, you took a calculated risk. In order to survive till morning, they will either suffer straw or sink into feathers. Even the most meticulously constructed bed, complete with feather mattresses, drapes, and piles of blankets, couldn't always ensure survival on its own. On the coldest nights, furnishings didn't make a difference. It was companionship. Your body heat just seeped into the walls while you slept by yourself in a stone room. Warmth multiplied when you slept next to other people. In the dark, bodies squeezed together like radiators. Although they seldom ever acknowledged it publicly, noble families were aware of this. Workers frequently slept on pallets at the foot of the master bed or in adjacent rooms. Service and security were not the main considerations in the deal. It was useful too. Even by a few valuable degrees, temperatures rose when there were more people in an area. At first, you may not sense the warmth. However, every additional body mattered around midnight when ice accumulated on the inside of the shutters. Monks slept in long rows in drafty dormitories with their cots or straw beds next to one another, according to accounts from medieval monasteries. It was not only a case of collective discipline, it was survival too. Body heat produced a thin layer of insulation in the cramped spaces. The similar idea held true in barracks. where troops cuddled in rows with their cloaks drawn tight, believing that they would be better able to withstand the cold together than separately. An interesting story from an English manor from the 14th century. In one nobleman's testament, it was expressly stipulated that his preferred squire should have a nighttime spot close to his lord's chamber fire. This is seen by scholars as an acknowledgement that the warmth of camaraderie was just as precious as inheritance, in addition to being a sign of favor. It was more than just closeness to be asked to share a bed or room. It was a warm privilege. Naturally, there was more to the practice. Creatures, specifically dogs, turned into real warmers. Although the term three-dog night may have originated in much later legend, the concept has historical roots. Due to their ability to radiate heat and their need for company, medieval folk frequently let hounds into their beds. The difference between comfort and numb toes may be a couple of big mastiffs curled at your feet. In certain inns, travelers even noted that guests slept crammed together with lambs, dogs, or even goats next to them. The scent was strong, yet warmth was more important than perfume. The extent to which bed sharing among nobles was socially acceptable is still up for dispute among academics. Some contend that it was ordinary travelers with strangers, women with servants, and lords with reliable company. Others maintain that such closeness was restricted and strictly regulated among the aristocracy, with attendants being assigned to adjacent pallets instead of the bed itself. However, it is evident that sharing a bed was common among lower social strata. Under a single pile of blankets, families were huddled close, with parents, kids, and frequently grandparents creating a tangle of limbs. When it came to survival, privacy didn't really matter. Now picture yourself lying on such a bed, crammed shoulder to shoulder with other people rather than by yourself. The first few minutes are uncomfortable. The elbows prod. A cough is heard. A blanket slides. However, the temperature quickly increases. A communal body heat cocoon. Your muscles gradually relax as you feel the dog's weight on your feet and hear your friend's gentle breathing. You nearly believe in comfort inside this cluster, even though the castle may howl with the wind. Naturally, there were disadvantages to this. Lice and fleas spread quickly, and secrets were whispered in the dark. However, the decision was straightforward when you compared such annoyances to the possibility of shivering during a restless night. You opted for company over loneliness and warmth over dignity. The idea of sharing a bed with servants, siblings, or animals may seem strange to contemporary thinking. However, it was a survival tactic that was inherited and regarded as common sense by medieval sleepers. Every extra body was a blessing in a world of ice and stone. Therefore, keep in mind those previous sleepers who experienced the same cold but had less protections when you draw your own blanket tighter tonight. They had a straightforward answer. Express your warmth and wish for mercy from the darkness. Picture yourself snuggling under the covers after blowing out your candle. The bed curtains and the blankets aren't the only things that keep you alive tonight. It also has to do with your attire. Medieval people frequently went to bed almost as covered up as they were during the day, in contrast to the contemporary practice of changing into pajamas or even nothing at all. The insulating system was expanded to include clothing themselves. According to surviving clothing and household sources, the nightshirt was the standard item of clothing worn before bed, an enormous tunic-like garment of loose, long linen. You may not think of linen as being warm, but it was the sensible option. It is airy, somewhat smooth against the skin, and easier to launder than wool. Depending on how chilly it is, you might cover that with a cloak or an additional wool tunic. The more layers, the better, to medieval brains. However, one particular thing sticks out: the QY, or nightcap. These were little cotton hats that were either pulled tightly over the head or fastened beneath the chin. Why is protecting the head so important? Because it was commonly held, and understandably so, that the head was where the majority of body heat exited. Without a qual, a sleeper in the Middle Ages was as vulnerable as a knight without armor. Even persons snuggled into bed with their heads covered neatly are seen in illuminated manuscripts. They appear more prepared for travel than for dreaming. The length of the nightshirt itself may differ. Families in poverty wore whatever they had, frequently using their underwear for sleeping. Wealthier aristocrats ordered fur-edged or finely threaded nightwear. Some women even wore sleeping hoods with ribbons trailing behind them, but it's likely that such were unusable in practice. The idea was obvious regardless of style: cover as much as you could. An odd remark from a medical literature from the 15th century suggests that people who sleep should wrap their feet in wool or linen to keep the night air out. This was more than just style. The fact that the extremities froze first was recognized early. Before going to bed, people made improvised mittens and socks by wrapping strips of fabric around their hands, ankles, and toes. It's nearly palpable. Every inch of skin was protected from the unrelenting cold by your swaddled hands, cocooned feet, and wrapped body. What about argument, though? The extent to which specialized sleep attire was more common than merely recycling daily clothing is still up for debate among academics. According to some, peasants just fell in whatever they were wearing throughout the day. There was no such thing as nightwear. Others cite wills and inventories that expressly mention night linens, implying that different sleepwear was common, at least for the middle and upper classes. Depending on rank and location, both points of view are true. However, everyone acknowledges that hiding at night was unavoidable. Now imagine yourself getting ready for bed like this. You take off your bulkier outer garments, put on a long linen shirt, and cover your ears with a tight-fitting hat. Until you pull the blankets up, the air nips at your neck. Together, the fabric's fibers create a cocoon, each contributing a little layer of protection. Even though the room is cold and the bed is drafty, at least your body has transformed into a cloth stronghold. The sensory details are striking. At first, the linen feels chilly and a little scratchy, but it warms as your skin does. The earthy but comforting scent of sheep and lanolin permeates the wool. Your cap muffles sound and gives you a sense of enclosure as it softly pushes around your skull. Swaddled like a package, you wriggle into place and bide your time till you fall asleep. Beyond just being warm, nightwear had another purpose: modesty. Being half-dressed or nude was frowned upon in a society where sharing a bed was the norm. Manuscripts frequently showed married couples in bed with long shirts and headgear. Surviving the night was not the only goal. Propriety was at issue. Therefore, your nightshirt and coif had a social as well as a utilitarian purpose, regardless of your status as a lord, lady, servant, or soldier. Consider the cadence of such evenings: the custom of putting on extra clothes, fixing knots, smoothing wrinkles and dressing up rather than down before putting out the fire. Nowadays, we think of nightwear as a way to unwind. It served as protection from the weather for the sleeper of the Middle Ages. Think of those people from long ago who went to bed dressed more like travelers than dreamers, with their heads pressed closely against the darkness and wrapped in linen and wool. Their slumber was not easy, so keep that in mind as you pull your own blanket tonight. It was designed to withstand the never-ending onslaught of cold stone, layer after layer and thread by stitch. Imagine a servant approaching with a long-handled pan just before you go beneath the covers. Its metal surface was dimly illuminated by the flames. The scent of heated metal and ash fills the room as hot coals crackle and hiss. This intriguing item was the medieval warming pan, a basic yet clever tool after all who wanted to crawl into sheets that felt like blocks of ice. This is how the ceremony proceeded. With the embers within radiating heat via small openings, the servant moved the pan back and forth between the bedclothes. Smoke billowed from the blankets above, and the slight tang of burning wood filled the air. The bed changed from a freezing slab to something nearly welcoming for a few minutes. You may lay shivering for an hour without doing this step until the heat from your body eventually melted the cold. Warming pans are included with commonplace nighttime items like lamps and chamber pots in surviving inventory from aristocratic homes. They weren't uncommon, they were anticipated. By the late Middle Ages, they were considered winter necessities in affluent European dwellings. Without one, a room was either unmaintained or inhabited by a person of low enough rank to not be worthy of the luxury. However, there were risks associated with these pans. Letters from the present day lament that when servants left the pan in one spot for too long, the sheets were charred black or even burned. Imagine finding a smoldering hole where your bedding should be as you slide into bed. Stories of aristocratic men leaping out of bed in the middle of the night due to sparks from a warming pan catching the covers in a wooden-roofed room full of dry rushes are partly tragic and half amusing. Such mishaps weren't insignificant. Before warming the bed, one especially strange story from Italy says to sprinkle scented herbs right onto the fire. It was believed that the smoke left behind would cleanse the air and prevent illness. Now you can practically smell it. When you eventually climbed under it, the biting tang of flames clinging to the cloth blended with the scent of lavender and rosemary. The belief blended superstition with pragmatism, a nocturnal fight against unseen diseases and colds. The extent to which warming pans were used is still a topic of discussion among experts on medieval domestic life. Some contend that because they were too costly and dangerous for most people, they were mostly restricted to wealthy houses. Others argue that middle-class households frequently used simpler forms, including clay pots filled with cloth-wrapped embers. Since such lowly objects seldom ever survived, the reality is obscure. Regardless of the form, it is evident that there was a preheating procedure for the bed in every community. Now picture yourself in your room, observing the procedure. Steam rises slightly as the wetness evaporates as the servant carefully moves the pan across the sheets. In contrast to the room's harsh cold, the air beneath the blankets is surprisingly warm when the pan is removed. In an attempt to capture that heat before it leaves, you swiftly slide inside. It seems like you've stolen a little piece of summer in the middle of winter for a few minutes. However, it is short-lived. The unrelenting cold of the castle walls quickly replaces the warmth. Maintaining your comfort during the night was never the trick. The goal was to make the initial stages of sleep tolerable. You were more likely to fall asleep and let your own body heat do the rest after your body calmed down and fatigue overtook the shivering. Compromise was symbolized by the warming pan. Just enough to get you started, but never enough to completely cure the cold. It was like to making a deal with the darkness. Comfort me for a few minutes, and I'll put up with the rest. You understand how ritualized sleep was in the Middle Ages when you picture yourself dozing asleep while the subtle aroma of ashes clings to your covers. There was a choreography of equipment, clothes, and gestures every evening. The warming pan wasn't only a showpiece. Without it, many evenings would have started with suffering instead of sleep, since it was a necessary component of the survival kit. A weight suddenly presses across your legs as you stir in your made-up bed and pull the thick blankets closer. A substantial warm form settles down for the night, sighs comfortably, and cuddles into the crook of your knees. It's not someone else. It's a dog, or maybe two, or if you're lucky, three. Allowing animals to sleep on the same bed was a common habit. In particular, dogs were more than simply hunting partners or property protectors. They served as warmers. They would remain close to their owners throughout the long hours of darkness because of their loyalty and the warmth emanating from their thick coats. A few hounds curled up at your feet may make a castle chamber that seemed like an icy cave much more tolerable. Small lapdogs were often given to wealthy women as gifts for company and warmth in bed, according to wills and household documents from the later Middle Ages. Despite being petted, combed, and scented, these comfort dogs, as we could today name them, were primarily used to ward off the cold of winter evenings. In contrast, larger breeds shielded their toes from frostbite by spreading out across the bottom of the bed like fuzzy logs. Intriguingly, there is a reference from Scandinavia that describes how, instead of staying in the unheated guest rooms during the winter, guests were frequently asked to sleep in stalls with animals. Sheep, oxen, and horses generate so much heat that it was better to lie next to them than in a solitary stone bed. Imagine falling asleep to the sound of a cow breathing steadily next to you. The fragrance of hay filled the air, yet the sheer heat of its mass warmed your body. Not glitzy, but efficient. On the other hand, dogs brought a unique closeness. A devoted dog keeps the frost out of his master's heart, according to a French saying from the Middle Ages. It is both lyrical and literal. In lonesome, drafty castles, the animal's presence calmed the soul, while its warmth supported the body. On the extent to which this practice was widespread, scholars are still at odds. According to others, it was frowned upon in formal homes to let animals on aristocratic beds. Instead, it was considered a private enjoyment rather than an open norm. Others contend that the evidence indicates it was common, particularly in border or country castles, where survival was more important than manners. The question of whether the picture of a woman sleeping with a lapdog is realistic or romantic is at the center of the argument. Now visualize the situation clearly. The bed's curtains are closed tight as you sleep wrapped in your wool blankets and linen nightshirt. The wind howls along the battlements outside. Your toes hurt from the cold, and then all of a sudden you can feel a hound's warmth against them. Its body is firm, its fur coarse, and even though it smells of the woods and the hunt, you embrace it without question. You are soon cocooned in live heat, not just fabric, as another dog rolls up by your side. The world is changed within the bed, even if the chamber is still cold. Naturally, there were drawbacks to this. Dogs occasionally chewed on bones that were concealed beneath the covers, shed fur, and dragged in dirt. Alongside them, insects spread to their human counterparts. Nevertheless, the sacrifice was worthwhile. Fleas are preferable to frostbite. A soiled blanket is preferable than a sleepless night. The combination of senses is memorable. Dog fur's earthy scent, the slight smoke that sticks to your clothing, the weight of blankets, and beneath it all, the steady cadence of another creature's breathing. It is understandable why people spoke of their animals with a kind of veneration that verges on adoration. Sharing survival meant sharing warmth. Even though the term three-dog night was created much later, it perfectly sums up how people slept throughout the Middle Ages. 2 dogs represented a significant chill, while 1 dog suggested a tolerable cold. 3 meant that even aristocrats piled all available sources of heat into the bed since the night was so harsh. As you lie in your own bed tonight, consider how remarkable it must have been for humans to find solace and strength in the simple devotion of an animal snuggled by their side while they were surrounded by darkness, secluded by stone, and attacked by drafts. Via innumerable frigid nights, the person and dog sustained one another via that tiny exchange of warmth. Take a moment to draw back the drapes and imagine yourself outside the regal chamber. Another realm of slumber is revealed in the dimly lit servants' quarters across the courtyard. The objective of surviving through frigid nights was the same, notwithstanding the dramatic differences between peasant and noble sleep. Then, who slept warmer? You may be surprised by the response. Nobles possessed large canopies, warming pans, fur collages, feather mattresses, and magnificence. However, comfort was not necessarily a sign of grandeur. It was difficult to heat their huge sleeping rooms, since they were designed as much for show as for comfort. The stone absorbed heat like a sponge, even in the presence of blazing furnaces. Thus, a lord may breathe air that turned into mist in front of his eyes while lying on piles of fur and down. Peasants, on the other hand, lived in modester homes made of wood and daub, which were sufficiently tiny to be heated by a single hearth. Insulation was provided by a thatched roof covered in straw. In contrast to a drafty keep, the air was much more bearable when families snuggled close, sometimes with animals stabled at one end of the space. Even though the huts were crude, a visitor to an English village in the 14th century noted with mild surprise that they provided far greater warmth than the Lord's Tower. However, comfort was not as important as prestige. Higher quality wool, imported furs, and linen that softened with washing were among the finest materials available to nobles. Sheepskins that had been roughly cured in smokehouses or blankets that had been mended till they thinned were used by peasants to make dew. Despite being well insulated, their bedding never felt or looked opulent, and it smelled strongly of fireplace smoke and lanolin. Peasants occasionally slept straight on benches by the fire, with their children cuddled up in their laps, a according to one interesting observation from memorial archives. The proximity to the hearth ensured warmth, but they carried the risk of smoke and sparks. The noble's bedroom, which was isolated from the main hall, frequently lacked that instant warmth. As a result, comfort was not always distributed as one might anticipate. The true hierarchy of warmth is still a mystery to researchers today. Did riches automatically translate into greater sleep, or did peasants find it easier to survive the winter evenings in their small but cozy cottages? There is evidence in both directions. Some academics contend that nobles remained dominant due to the large volume of textiles they produced. Others maintain that the aristocracy's magnificence could not compete with the practical warmth provided by the lower classes' smaller shared areas. The debate, which emphasizes how much sleep itself mirrored socioeconomic inequalities, is still unresolved. Now picture the two scenes next to each other. A nobleman is shifting in the castle under thick blankets, his breath curling white, the great room resonating with each gust of wind against the shutters. A peasant family crouches on a straw mattress in front of the hearth down in the village. Kids curled up like puppies, and the scent of animals wafted from the adjacent stall. One bed is earthy and packed, the other elaborate and stiffly formal. Which body, though, wakes up warmer? There may be no one-size-fits-all solution to this persistent conundrum, but there was one thing that both nobles and peasants had in common. They adjusted. In order to survive in the medieval night, one had to learn to cope with adversity and change their dwellings and routines until they could finally relax. Nobility might show off their wealth. Even though peasants depended on simplicity and intimacy, they all slept under the same winter stars, freezing and dreaming their way to dawn. You can feel the irony tonight as you drift in your own cozy bed. Medieval sleep quality was not always determined by status, but it was by the trappings. The most opulent hall was not always as authentically warm as the most modest cottage. You may assume that a bed in a noble chamber never moved after it was set up. These beds were, after all, enormous structures that were laden with drapes and carved posts. In reality, however, families frequently changed their sleeping arrangements according on the season. The bedrooms were not permanent havens. They were adaptable areas selected based on how they interacted with wind, fire, and sunshine. To put it another way, you ran away from the sun in the summer and chased it in the winter. This tendency is clearly visible in documents from noble estates. The physics of heating required some castles to include winter and summer chambers, not because inhabitants desired a change of scenery. Families relocated to rooms facing south during the colder months, where the wan sun came through the windows for a few valuable hours every day. There, the air felt a bit less hostile, the walls held a bit more heat, and waking up wasn't nearly as harsh. When summer arrived, they left those bright areas behind and withdrew into cooler, darker chambers facing north. The stories of Edward IV's household, where entire beds and furnishings were relocated seasonally, provide a well-documented example. Wherever the monarch decided to sleep, servants made makeshift nests by carrying tapestries, feather mattresses, and linens from one chamber to another. Although it was a logistical challenge, survival for people residing in stone palaces depended on mobility. A fascinating letter from a Biandian courtier who lamented losing his room to the frost one year has survived. He claimed that the walls became so chilly and damp that he would not sleep there, opting instead for a smaller chamber that faced the rising light. His wording serves as a reminder that the structure itself was an enemy in castles. The cold took over rooms, which were then relinquished and reclaimed when the seasons changed. Whether or not every castle actually had several seasonal chambers, or if this was a privilege of the largest estates, is still up for debate among archaeologists and architectural historians. Some contend that most castles only featured a small number of adequate sleeping quarters, requiring occupants to put up with the cold. Others maintain that evidence of fireplaces, window positions, and preserved documents demonstrates deliberate planning for seasonal living. The picture is convincing, yet the argument is still open. As the weather changed, the aristocratic family moved within its own walls, like birds moving their nests. Imagine yourself doing this now, knowing that the long nights will soon require every advantage. You start to eye the light side of the keep in the fall. Your bed, mattress, hauling frame, and hangings are disassembled piece by servants. As tapestries are hammered into place to prevent drafts, the sound of carpenters fixing posts reverberates throughout the new chamber. You are tucked away in a chamber that at least welcomes you with faint shafts of morning light by the time the first frost arrives. The sensory details are striking. You awaken to the scent of freshly hung woolen curtains, the faint sound of servants sweeping rushes across the floor of your new chamber, and the pale warmth of the sun peeking through shutters. The cold persists after the shift. It just controls it, making the intolerable bearable. Although less formally, peasants also moved their sleeping quarters according to the seasons. In the summer, when the air was cooler, families would hide in lofts or barns. But in the winter, they would sleep near the hearth, huddled around the fire in one room. Sleep was erratic in both castles and cottages, determined more by the weather than by interior design. This custom serves as a reminder that fixed bedrooms were not as common in medieval life as they are today. There was no permanent sacred place in a bedroom. It was a makeshift camp inside the bigger stone castle. Life changed with the seasons. Chambers were cycled and beds were shifted. The castle was alive, its occupants moving like nomads inside its walls as light and temperature changed its shape. Another reality of medieval sleep is thus revealed. Instead of being static, it was dynamic. The battle against cold required strategy, mobility, and ongoing adaptation. You didn't sleep where you wanted to. Wherever the sun, wind, and moisture allowed, you slept. And you started that cycle anew every year when the world rotated. Take a moment to stand by the small window of a medieval room and allow the breeze to caress your skin. Castle windows were exposed holes in the wall, in contrast to modern homes with their glass panes and covered frames. They served as both invitations to the wind and defenses against arrows. These openings were merely shutters or stretched cloth that kept out little more than rain and birds in the absence of glass, double glazing, or even the idea of insulation. Glass was so uncommon in many castles that it was only used in chapels or the Lord's private oratory, according to written surveys of medieval households. Thick planks that could be barred from the inside were used as wooden shutters in ordinary chambers. They creaked in the wind as they closed tightly in the winter, but they stood open in the summer to let in light and air. However, wood by itself was insufficient to protect against the cold. The room became humid as cold seeped through the seams. Stretching fabric across the aperture was a useful fix. Occasionally, linen was treated in oil or wax to make it transparent and rainproof. During the day, this let in a faint amber glow that was hazy and gentle like sunshine passing through paper. At night, it muffled the wind's shriek, but it never stopped it. Sleepers had to get used to the continual reminder that their fortress was permeable as the structure trembled and the fabric flapped. An interesting example is a home narrative of horn windows from the 13th century in France. Animal horn was scraped into thin, translucent slices and placed inside wooden frames. They offered a less refined but more robust substitute for cloth. Although they twisted and yellowed quickly, they were more resilient to weather and admitted pale light. Imagine observing such suffering. As though viewed through foggy glass, the world became hazy. However, the air in your chamber is slightly less harsh. The prevalence of these horn or oiled cloth windows is a topic of contention among archaeologists and architectural historians. While most homes relied solely on shutters, some claim they were a luxury of the richest castles. Others contend that they were unexpectedly common in Northern Europe by the later Middle Ages. Although the evidence is patchy, the discussion itself serves as a reminder of how desperate individuals were to create makeshift barricades to keep out the cold. Imagine yourself standing in front of such a window. Even with the shutter pulled and the cloth tacked across the frame, a distinct frost line continues to form down the sill. As you lean close to it, your breath clouds. The moon is reflected by the snow outside. However, you can hear the wind moaning for a gap and the slight creaking of wood inside. You are aware that the draft will reach you no matter how precisely you place your bed curtains. The soundscape is eerie. In a far-off hallway, shutters bang. Faintly, the fabric snaps like sails. Muttering servants cram rags into crevices. As temporary insulation, some homes even packed clay or moss into the spaces around the frames. It was temporary, filthy, and ugly. However, any action was preferable to none when the temperature dropped below freezing. The same struggle was encountered by peasants living in huts. Their homes frequently used shutters to block off small openings rather than windows at all. Some used animal bladder membranes that had been stretched thin to allow light to enter. It had an unsettling impression. The world outside seemed to be hidden behind a curtain as the rooms lit slightly, but with warped shadows. Even these covers, however, became brittle ice at night as the frost solidified them into translucent sheets. The irony was harsh to nobles. They had protection and status because to their tall towers, but they were also vulnerable to strong winds. Occasionally, visitors commented that they felt colder the higher they slept. A peasant in his little hut can be envious of a lord's wealth, but he won't be envious of the draught that blows through the window of a tower chamber. But there was also beauty. Picture yourself on a starry night, resting in bed. The shutters were slightly damaged, allowing silver light to spill across the floor. The chill crept in. Indeed, that is poetry of shadows. The faint gleam of snow outside, the silhouette of branches against the curtain. Sleep in the Middle Ages was a mix of wonder and discomfort, with even the most difficult nights bringing fleeting moments of tranquility. Imagine those old windows when you draw your own curtains tonight. They served more as reminders that night always managed to get in, regardless of how solid the walls were. overcoming the cold was never the goal of sleep. Draft after draft till daylight arrived, it was about learning to live with it. Imagine yourself walking up to a castle bedroom's hearth, hoping that the fire will save you. A fire in a stone room must undoubtedly indicate warmth. The truth, however, is much less consoling. The chimneys of the massive medieval fires were so broad that whole trees could be fed into them. Despite their impressive appearance, they did a terrible job of heating the room. It was just basic physics. More heat escaped straight up with the smoke in a bigger chimney. Even when logs fell into flaming embers, sparks danced and flames raged. You were still more than a few steps away, and your breath was still misting the air. Within its immediate circle, the fire produced a radiant oasis of heat. Beyond that, however, the castle chamber was still icy. The amount of wood this required is highlighted in household records. In a big castle, a single winter week may use up whole wagon loads of wood. Forest management became an ongoing problem, not only for building, but also for fuel. In his letters, a French nobleman bemoaned the fact that maintaining the warmth of his large hall had depleted the woods more quickly than any conflict. Although they consumed resources, fires rarely offered the solace one had hoped for. There are also humorous accounts. Occasionally, guests would make jokes about how noble fires were too feeble to warm a man, but large enough to roast an ox. The exaggeration is accurate. These hearths offered majesty, light, and spectacle, but they offered little actual protection from the relentless cold of the stone walls. In order to reflect heat into the space, several homes tried putting iron firebacks behind the flames. Others used tiles to line hearths in order to retain heat for a bit longer. However, these actions were only part of the answer. Tinkering with an issue that is too big to completely solve. Sitting directly in front of a burning fire might keep your feet warm, but your back would still be cold, and your bed across the room might as well have been outside. The effectiveness of castle fires is still up for debate among academics. Some contend that when paired with heavy furniture and hangings, they created a multi-layered system of heat retention that offered significant warmth. Others argue that because the majority of the energy went up the chimney, they were virtually symbolic and more about ritual and prestige than comfort. The reality probably differed from castle to castle based on climate, architecture, and available resources. Now picture yourself in that kind of space. Sparks spit onto the hearthstones as the fire crackles fiercely. Smoke curls upward, giving the air a subtle flavor. Your shoulders are still frigid, but your face is flushed and tingling with warmth. Holding out your hands till you almost singe your sleeves, you shuffle closer. The warmth drops with each step as you grudgingly make your way across the chamber to your bed. You might as well have been sitting outside by the time you get under the covers. In contrast, peasants frequently gained more from their smaller hearths. Smoky as it was, the entire interior of a small cottage was heated by a single central fire. Because of the small area, the combined heat of the flames and bodies was bearable. In contrast, although the big noble stoves used resources, they left rooms partially frozen. Once more, grandeur did not equate to comfort. Nevertheless, the fire ritual was important. Heat wasn't the only factor. It was about coming together, about light, about knowing that at least something resisted the darkness. People slept in chairs next to the fire, told stories by it, and prayed by it. The illumination provided psychological protection, a ray of hope in the lifeless cold, even when the warmth didn't extend throughout the room. Therefore, don't picture a raging fireplace protecting you from the cold on a medieval night. Instead, imagine a delicate island of warmth amid a sea of freezing air. Comfort that vanished as soon as you got into bed, and comfort that only lasted as long as you were close. The hearth served as both a useful utility and a show. The sleeper of the Middle Ages also learned to appreciate what little it could provide. It feels comfortable for a minute as you draw closer to that bright hearth. However, a different aspect of medieval society emerges: smoke. Fireplaces were not hygienic, effective devices. They left soot, belched fumes, and filled chambers with a haze that coated everything and hurt the eyes. To stay warm by fire meant waking up with ash-covered lungs, enduring blackened walls, and breathing smoke every night. It was a source of furious complaints from chroniclers at the time. A monk in northern England reported that he coughed more than he prayed because his cell became so covered with soot from the hearth. Nobles were not exempt either. Women bemoaning destroyed clothes and linens stained by continuous smoke exposure are mentioned in court records. In just one winter, a freshly cleaned tapestry could turn grey. The situation was exacerbated by the architecture. Without the airflow control of contemporary flue, chimneys were broad, unrefined shafts. Not all smoke rose in a courteous manner. It clung to the chamber and drifted and eddied. Everyone within coughed if the wind blew in the wrong direction and poured back into the room. Imagine attempting to sleep with your eyes watering and your throat burning from smoke. One intriguing finding from travelers' notes is that some people purposefully spread lime or clay on their walls to conceal soot streaks as well as to brighten interior spaces. At least the appearance of cleanliness could be temporarily restored, but the black residue never really disappeared. But the scent, a concoction of moist stone, charred wood, and burned wool that stuck to clothing and bedding, was irreversible. There is still disagreement among academics about how bearable these smoky rooms were. Some claim that people in the Middle Ages just adjusted. It hardened their bodies and expectations. Others assert that even modern people are aware of the health consequences, citing numerous complaints about blackened lungs and clogged air in medical treatises. Both might be true. People have no choice but to endure. However, they continue to complain about it. Now picture yourself after a night like this, laying in bed. There's a smoke odor in your hair. The bitter scent of ash is in your covers. Additionally, your tongue tastes harsh when you cough. Some of it is trapped inside the bed curtains. Thus, the spirit of the fire is present in even your small cocoon. Even though your room was warmer than before, the fresh air was sacrificed. It was no better for peasants. They frequently have no chimneys at all in their cottages. Simply put, smoke rose from the central hearth and filled the rafters, slowly seeping through the thatch. Children were raised in smoke-filled homes all the time. Before they reached adulthood, their lungs turned black. However, it was accepted as usual. Some even thought that by keeping insects away, the smoke preserved the timber roof. With each breath, superstition and survival merged. It was an overpowering sensory experience. Particles of soot pricked your flesh. The rushes on the floor collected black dust, and your eyes kept watering. Servants swept incessantly, but it seemed pointless. It was the same every winter. a fight against cold, a fight against smoke, and the realization that winning one would only make the other worse. Nevertheless, fire was unavoidable despite the inconvenience. Without it, no one could make it through a castle winter. People reconciled as a result. They proudly displayed smoky tapestries. They suffered from spells of coughing. Every morning, they cleaned their cheeks of soot. To stay warm, one had to make sacrifices. Clean air was the sacrifice. Thus, you are breathing comfortably and mindlessly while you lie in your contemporary bed tonight. Think about the remarkable nature of such riches. Every warm night meant another smoky morning for sleepers in the Middle Ages. The smell of burning wood permeated their dreams. They lived under the soot shadow. A candle was frequently the primary source of light in a medieval room as the fire faded and the night continued. This subtle flame could be thought of as decor or a hint of ambience. However, the candle was also a source of brittle warmth for many sleepers. Naturally, a room could not be heated by a single wick, but even the smallest contribution meant in a world where every glimmer mattered. During the Middle Ages, candles took many different forms. Rich homes burned beeswax, which produced a bright, clear flame and a subtle honeyed aroma. These were costly and only used in chapels, royal chambers, or celebrations. Tallow candles, which are created from rendered animal fat, were used more frequently. They sputtered, smoked, and smelled like grease. Imagine falling asleep with the fragrance of wool and the dampness of stone mingled with the pungent smell of burning tallow. Candles, however, were more than just illumination. Nearby, they produced an unexpected quantity of heat. If you put one next to your bed curtain, you may feel the cloth become a little warmer. A number of candles were placed on stands in some homes, forming clusters of flames that provided warmth and illumination. Although it wasn't exactly central heating, it did lessen the severity of the cold in their local vicinity. An intriguing story about a noblewoman who insisted on having 12 candles in her chamber at once on winter evenings so that she might sleep is preserved in a letter from the 14th century. Although her request indicates a truth, the servants complained about the luxury. Even in cases where the effect was negligible, people used light as a substitute warmer. The risks were clear. Rich bed curtains made of linen and wool were very flammable, and candle flames were quickly extinguished. Records show that negligent placement caused fires that burned entire chambers to cinders. A squire who fell asleep with a lamp on the bed rail is the subject of one especially gloomy German legend. He barely made it out alive when he woke up to discover his sheets on fire. The servants accused him of being careless, but his need for a little warmth too close at hand was the true cause. Whether medieval people fully comprehended the risks or if regular candle use led to complacency is still up for debate among academics. Inventories of burned textiles, according to some, demonstrate that mishaps were frequent but tolerated. Others think that by designating slaves to keep an eye on the lights late at night, the affluent reduced risk. In any event, there was always a balance between comfort and risk. Imagine yourself in such a room now. Only shadows creep up the walls as the fire in the hearth has burned down to coals. On a wooden stand close to your bed, a lone candle is burning. As you draw the covers closer, its gentle golden radiance creates a halo that reaches your hands. Your face feels less cold as a result of the subtle warmth that emanates. Wax flows steadily down the edge, the flame flickers, and there's a subtle whiff of smoke. The rest of the room disappears into darkness beyond your curtain. You pay attention to the small noises, such as the soft drop of wax on metal, the sigh of wind on the shutters, and the silent pop of the wick. This tiny circle of heat and light becomes your entire world. The candle transforms into more than just light. It becomes a companion and a tenuous ally against the night's vastness. Simpler variations of this scene occurred in cottages and inns. Beside their straw pallets, travelers set up cheap, fat-dipped rushlights. These hissed and spat, burning unevenly and rapidly, yet their dim glow was comforting. To stave off anxiety and cold, parents placed little lamps close to their kids. Citing necessity and safety, even austere monks permitted lamps to burn in their dorms. It was a memorable sensory experience. Smoke and melted fat filled the air. After months of burning, the walls were covered in soot. Where wax had splashed, the bedclothes was discolored. However, these flaws were accepted by the public. The candle was more than ornamentation throughout the coldest winter. It was a matter of survival. Tonight, when you slumber beneath your own pure electric light, visualize the delicate flicker of a medieval flame. With each spark, it ran the risk of catastrophe and warmed just enough to fool the body into sleeping. In the Middle Ages, even the smallest details might cause discomfort during sleep. Closing your eyes meant having faith that your brittle flame will endure through the night without destroying warmth. The common dormitory is another aspect of medieval sleep that may be found if you leave the noble chambers and enter the community areas. Private attendants, feather beds, and thick curtains were not available to everyone. Monks, warriors, apprentices, and slaves frequently shared quarters where endurance was prioritized over pleasure. Consider the monastery. Brothers were required by monastic regulations to live simply, which meant that their dorms were large halls filled with pallets or beds arranged in rows. The thin windows far above were the only breaks in the endless stone floor. Every monk had a straw mattress or little cot of their own, sometimes consisting of just a thin pad and a wooden plank. The monks' beds were placed so near to one another that they could hear one another's breathing. Numbers provided warmth. Privacy was unknown. These halls reverberated at night with snoring, coughing, and the rustle of thick woolen blankets, according to surviving testimonies. Despite the damp, cold, and dense air, the hostel was able to maintain more heat than an isolated room could because of the large number of people using it. Because the monks were arranged like sheaves, one chronicler observed that the cloister was warmer than the Lord's Tower. The situation was far more severe in the military. Barrack halls were packed with soldiers billeted in war encampments or castles. Men were arranged in long rows over straw beds, with weapons piled close by. Cloaks served as cover, and blankets were shared. The stench was a stew of humans, a mixture of smoking, sweat, leather, and straw. However, even this rough fellowship became tolerable for the weary. Sleeping side by side meant surviving the night. The regulations of some evening orders contain an interesting observation. In addition to providing light, candles were kept burning in the common areas to provide the men with warmth. Even though the illumination didn't greatly increase the temperature, it did provide a psychological comfort. Just as important as the flame's intensity was its symbolic meaning. Whether communal sleeping was an intentional choice for warmth or merely a result of need is still up for debate among historians. Some contend that the monasteries meant it to serve as a kind of discipline, a continual reminder that no monk enjoyed personal luxury. Others contend that the coziness of communal space was a useful benefit that coincidentally matched spiritual principles. The same uncertainty applies to soldiers. Did they bed together because they were friends, or because it was too cold to be alone? It was probably both. Imagine yourself sleeping in one of these corridors now. As you move, the straw beneath you crackles. One of the neighbors coughs. It rotates again. The vaulted ceiling enhanced the sound. The air is not as harsh as it would be in a solitary room, but the smell of sweat and smoking lingers. You tuck your wool blanket tighter as it scratches your chin. Despite your need for quiet, you're thankful for the warmth you share. There is no mistaking the dormitory's rhythm. Like waves, snores come and go, broken here and there by the whisper of a dream. A rat scuttles across the rushes somewhere, but the men are too tired to notice. The high windows allow the draft to still enter, but the heat from everyone's bodies lessens its impact. Even if you don't feel comfortable, you feel safer than you would if you were by yourself in a large, reverberating stone chamber. Household staff and apprentices led similar lives. Little boys or maids would roll out straw pallets in the lofts and side chambers of castles, sometimes in storerooms or under staircases. They created makeshift bedrooms out of modest spaces by huddling together and layering cloaks. They had the benefit of being close by, but they were unable to order warming pans or feather mattresses like nobility could. Their sleeping spaces were warmer because they were more compact and packed. These public areas provided a unique sensory experience. The smell of musky bodies squeezed close together, the scratch of straw, the low hum of breathing, the rough wool against flesh, and the subtle trickle of water from the roof. It was endurance rather than peace in the contemporary sense. People didn't anticipate seclusion or quiet. They anticipated surviving. Thus, while you sleep in your own bed tonight, imagine those lengthy corridors where monks recite prayers before turning out the lights, where soldiers collapse in rows following combat, and where servants curl up in secret nooks. They were warmed by one another, not by silk or fur. In the Middle Ages, sleep was just as much about community as it was about comfort. A reminder that survival was rarely a lone task, even in the coldest castles. You've made yourself at home in your mental dormitory. However, warmth isn't certain even here. Someone always had to wake up in the middle of the night, stumble across the floor, and stoke the embers in order to tend to the fires. Sleep was rarely undisturbed in the Middle Ages. Not only did neighbors' coughs and the uncomfortable straw cause people to wake up repeatedly, but it was also practically necessary to keep the fire going. The body clock of the Middle Ages was not like ours. 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep was not what they anticipated. Rather, individuals experienced what some academics refer to as fragmented sleep. After dusk came the first sleep, which lasted for a few hours until around midnight. Then a lot of people woke up, sometimes to tend to fires, sometimes to pray, and occasionally to check on kids or animals. They slept again till daybreak after an hour or two of silent awake. This break was frequently used for fire maintenance throughout the cold months. Without it, chambers grew intolerable and embers died. One well-known account is found in the writings of a physician from the 15th century who suggested using the time between first and second sleep for introspection, intimacy, or even discussion. This waking time seemed natural to him, but it was less philosophy and more duty for the castle servant who had to trudge across freezing floors to feed logs into a hearth. He blew into the flames, listened to the crackle of new wood, and hoped they would catch. Some rural accounts mention an odd tradition. Watch duties were entrusted to families, particularly in big halls. To check the flames, each adult rose in turn. Bells in monasteries rang periodically during the night to summon monks to prayer, and ironically, to make sure that someone was always awake to keep an eye on the heat. Sleep was a communal rhythm interspersed with responsibilities, rather than a personal retreat from the outside world. Whether segmented sleep was more prevalent in Northern Europe, where winter nights were longer, or if it was universal, historians disagree. Some contend that necessity required it. A single stretch of sleep was just impracticable due to the length of darkness. Others contend that it was a cultural custom rather than purely a geographic one. Tending the fire was at the core of these evening rhythms, regardless of the ongoing discussion. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night. Except for snores, the room is quiet. The blanket is pushed back. Fumble for a log as you feel the cold slap of air across your skin. On straw, your feet crush. As you stir the dwindling embers, your palms sting and your breath rises in plumes. Warmth radiates back into the room as logs reluctantly catch and sparks explode. You breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that your companions will sleep soundly for a few more hours. The sensory detail will stick in your memory. The scent of smoke blending with wool, the pop of wood, and the subtle illumination driving shadows away. As you slip back under the covers, your fingers hurt, but the joy of rekindling the fire keeps you steady. The bed feels much cozier. Cottage peasants, on the other hand, followed the same rhythm. Their hearths were open fires on the ground with no protective grates. Thus, a negligent sleeper ran the possibility of dying, or worse, spreading the fire. Every time a family member got up to observe, poke embers, and adjust logs. Sleep was intermittent and always synchronized with the fire's pulse. You then understand that nights in the Middle Ages were not passive periods of unconsciousness. They were bargained, controlled, and protected. People got up, went to work, prayed, checked on their animals, whispered to their loved ones, and went back to sleep. Life did not stop in the dark. It just slowed, broken only by breath and firelight. Imagine the ongoing attention to detail needed in those stone corridors while you rest in your cozy bed tonight. Closing your eyes was never a firm decision. Sleeping meant relying on someone to come awake, tend to the fire, and prevent the cold from taking over the space before daybreak. You've tried to snatch your racing thoughts, tended the fire, and scudded back under the covers. Another medieval approach to warmth, however, was motivated by a desire for luxury rather than pragmatism. The idea of taking a hot bath before bed lingered in the minds of some like a forbidden luxury. In the Middle Ages, bathing was difficult. Tubs were big, heavy devices, and heating water took a lot of fuel. It was by no means a regular practice to take a heated soak. Slipping into steaming water on a cold night was a type of magic for those who could afford it, but it was a special occasion that was frequently shared. According to chroniclers, Noblewomen lowered themselves into cloth-lined wooden tubs while steam curled up in the lamplight. Staff waiting with towels that have been warmed. For a moment, it felt like winter was over when you stepped out of such a bath and slid between covers. According to an odd Parisian document, affluent residents occasionally ordered tubs to be positioned close to fireplaces so that the bather would emerge into a room that was already heated. Herbs thrown into the water for aroma and alleged therapeutic benefits, such thyme or rosemary, filled the air. For a few moments, cheeks flushed, skin prickled with warmth, and the body felt ready for a good night's sleep. Such pleasures were uncommon, of course. Smaller comforts were more frequently sought after before bed. A typical treat was a cup of hot mead, spiced wine, or warm ale. The body was lulled toward drowsiness as the heat moved inward and diffused warmth throughout the chest. In some homes, basic hot water bottles that radiated heat for hours were put at the foot of the bed, wrapped in linen and kept close to the hearth. Noble households are said to have filled leather pouches with warm sand to tuck between beds, according to one pretty strange story. The sand took on the shape of the person and held heat longer than stones. Imagine sighing as the cold gradually subsided as you extended your frigid feet in the direction of such a bag. The inventiveness is remarkable. In the face of harsh winters, people experimented with the materials at their disposal. The prevalence of these bedtime indulgences is still up for debate among contemporary historians. Were they sporadic indulgences for the wealthiest, or were they also practiced in smaller form by middle-class families? According to some, most houses had access to hot stones and warming beverages. Some think they continued to be uncommon pleasures. The reason they were remembered was because they were uncommon. The argument serves as a reminder that comfort was a luxury that was disputed. Imagine yourself in this hypothetical room. A servant pours mulled wine into a cup while you relax in front of the fireplace. The smell of smoke and wet wool is overpowered by the aroma of cloves and cinnamon. Warmth blossoms in your chest as you take a slow drink. Your eyes go heavy, your limbs become less rigid, and the covers feel cozier and less confining when you finally get into bed. A cloth-wrapped stone at the foot of the bed radiates a slight heat against your toes. You don't fear the night for once. The sound of a log falling into flames, the prickling warmth of heated stone, and the sweet tang of spiced wine are all powerful sensory experiences. Your body is temporarily persuaded that comfort is achievable when you fall asleep with your senses fully engaged. Here's the reality, though. Such pleasures were brittle. The heat quickly subsided. As the drinks cooled, the room became frigid once more at midnight. These routines provided periods of psychological grace that made the unending cold bearable, but they did not provide long-term comfort. As you sleep tonight, consider how much the inhabitants of the Middle Ages craved warmth. They created ingenious implements, pursued transient pleasures, and turned even a hot beverage into a survival tactic. They were resourceful, but their nights were not easy. Every stone, every wash, and every ale drink was a tiny act of defiance against the cold. Medieval people never relied solely on practical means, even after baths, hot stones, or mulled wine. Cold was more than just a physical foe. It was also supernatural and spiritual. It was risky at night. The air itself was thought to contain disease and evil forces. In order to protect themselves while they slept, individuals began using charms, rituals, and superstitions. Hanging amulets over the bed was one technique that was frequently documented. These could be straightforward wooden crosses, tiny artifacts purported to hold holy power, or even herbs enclosed in little bags. Popular selections like rue, mugwort, and juniper were thought to ward off both bad spirits and the supposedly toxic night air. Picture yourself laying in bed under a canopy of aromatic bundles, the aroma blending with the musk of wool blankets and the smoke from the fireplace. Another shield was prayer. Noble households frequently recited paternistas or amaras at the bedside, while monastic regulations promoted chanting psalms before lying down. In order to protect themselves from cold or illness, even peasants mumbled charms that were half prayer and half spell. Some whispered poetry over kids, kissing their foreheads to ward off the night hag, a monster thought to suffocate sleepers. An interesting detail can be found in a 15th century German home manual. Iron items like a knife or scissors should be placed underneath the bed or pillow, according to the advice given to sleepers. It was believed that iron would keep out fairies and devils that crept into rooms during the long night, a silent barrier against invisible invaders. The metal glistened subtly in the firelight. There were also customs that were closely related to warming. According to one folk tale, you may prevent frostbite by flipping your shoes next to the bed. Another said that your body heat will not escape during the night if you murmured the names of 3 saints before extinguishing the candle. These seem like charming superstitions to us. They were tactics as essential to them as an additional blanket. There's still disagreement among academics regarding the seriousness of such acts. Some contend that prayers and charms were sincere and intricately interwoven with the cadence of everyday existence. Others contend that even if they weren't entirely believed, they were more akin to customs and gestures. In any case, something fundamental is revealed by the rites. Sleep was never trusted. It was a fragile state, susceptible to illness, cold, and spirits. Humans required spiritual and physical protection. Now imagine yourself lying in a bed from the Middle Ages. The room is dark, the fire is low, and the curtains are drawn. A juniper sprig hangs above you, its potent aroma piercing the smoky air. A tiny, reassuring iron knife is concealed beneath your pillow. You cross yourself, say a prayer in a quiet, repetitive voice, and then draw the blankets closer. The rituals seem to have created a protective circle around your vulnerable body, making the night seem less threatening. The experience is enhanced by the sensory details, the sound of whispered words, the feel of wool against your skin, the subtle metallic fragrance of iron next to your head, and the rustle of herbs against the canopy. Superstition, faith, and survival are all entangled at that instant. Although they used different materials, peasants engaged in similar practices. They used basic herbs collected from fields, knotted cords, carved wooden figures, or rudimentary charms in place of relics. Garlic was put beneath children's pillows by parents who thought it would ward off evil spirits and illness. They even incorporated animals. Before dark, cows and sheep were occasionally blessed in byres because it was believed that their presence would fortify the home against frost. Every social class used rituals in addition to fire and fabric to withstand the chilly night. The medieval intellect looked to the invisible for security and the corporeal for warmth. To go to sleep was to enter a world of mystery, where iron and flame, prayer and herb all cooperate to combat the protracted darkness. Imagine those small gestures, the turned shoes, the rosemary sprig, and the murmured name of the saint when you tuck yourself in tonight. Despite being invisible, these minor comforts were just as genuine. Survival for the medieval sleeper was never just about physical means. Additionally, it was spiritual armor made of hope, habit, and faith. Take a step back from the bed and survey the entire room. Beyond charms, dogs, or blankets, a room's construction influenced how well its residents might sleep. Initially, castles were constructed for protection. However, as time went on, builders tried several approaches to make the interiors more comfortable. The end product was a patchwork of features designed to sculpt warmth out of stone, some ingenious, others symbolic. The sun, a private space frequently reserved for the Lord and his family, was one such feature. The sun was smaller, higher in the structure, and easier to heat than the enormous Great Hall. Typically, it included windows facing the sun, rich wall hangings, and a fireplace of its own. This was not luxury in the contemporary sense. It was a tactic. The space was smaller, giving the fire's heat a better chance of surviving. Tapestries evolved beyond ornamentation. They were made of silk or wool and adorned the walls with tails and vibrant colors. Legendary animals, hunts, and saints, but they also provided insulation. A 10 or 20-foot wide tapestry might be so heavy that it was difficult for servants to hang. The moist stone was concealed behind it, and the air around the wall became slightly less frigid. You could even smell the earthy, slightly reassuring lanolin of the wool when you were close to one. Wooden paneling was erected in numerous chambers for the same purpose, according to archaeological assessments. By creating a buffer zone and capturing air pockets, oak boards helped to lessen the cave-like atmosphere. To prevent drafts, servants filled up spaces with rags, moss, or tow. Although the outcome was not flawless, it showed how far people would go to make unfriendly fortifications into habitable places. In estate accounts, an interesting detail comes to light. Like movable walls, nobility frequently carried their most valuable tapestries from one castle to another. They served as survival equipment in addition to being works of art. It would be like a soldier without armor, for a lord to travel without his hangings. The effectiveness of these architectural elements is still up for debate among experts on medieval home life. Some people think they actually kept heat and decreased drafts. Others maintain that psychological comfort was more important than physical distinction. Even though the real temperature hardly altered, entering a room adorned with colorful cloth and illuminated by firelight might feel warmer. The intricate relationship between perception and survival is highlighted by that discussion. Imagine entering such a room now. The wind howling from the hallway is muffled as the door shuts behind you. Candlelight partially illuminates the crimson and gold tapestries that cover the walls. In a carved stone fireplace, smoke twists upward as the fire flickers. The room appears more personal, since the timber ceiling above you appears lower than it does in the vast hall. It's still chilly. Though not as hostile as the open chambers below, you can see your breath in the air. The rough tapestry weave against your fingers, the subtle scent of smoke and wool, and the sound of fire crackling against oak logs all contribute to the multi-layered sensory impression. The cold lurks just beyond the hangings, but you almost think this chamber is a haven. Simpler versions of the same tactic were imitated by peasants. They lined their walls with wattle or plaster instead of weaving tapestries, and to cut down on drafts, they hung patched fabric or coarse wool. A simple patterned, vibrantly painted cloth could serve as both decoration and insulation. Peasants also reduced the area to a livable size by transforming the naked walls into protective shells. The positioning of sleeping quarters on higher floors was another subtle architectural device. There was at least a small advantage from the rising heat from the huge hall below. Sometimes kids slept in lofts above kitchens, where oven heat lingered. The layout was more about taking use of every stray degree of heat than it was about privacy. Nevertheless, the cold persisted in spite of all of these attempts. You could never break its hold. You could only lessen it. Nevertheless, the existence of sun chambers, wooden panels, and wall hangings demonstrates how much people desired to turn stone prisons into homes. Imagine those tapestries, the softness of wooden planks, the brilliant cloth, and the slight warmth of fires while you sleep tonight. They were acts of rebellion. Even though they weren't comfortable by our standards, it wasn't the lavender-scented idol of contemporary linen advertisements. Instead, the medieval household constructed layers of architecture, art, and psychology to say, this space is ours, and here, at least we will endure. Close your eyes and imagine the smell of a medieval bedroom. Instead, as soon as you stepped through the hefty wooden door, you were met with a thick stew of odor. You have to know what people smelled in order to comprehend how they slept, as each breath served as a reminder of their living circumstances. Smoke was always the first smell. In winter, fires burned nearly all the time, and in the absence of effective chimneys, the soot drifted back into the chamber. The air became heavy, the walls darkened, and the stench seeped into the very fibers of the curtains and blankets. The tang of ash quickly permeated even recently laundered linen. At night, you would lie down with smoke onto your skin, hair, and clothing. The smell of wet wool followed. In winter, blankets, cloaks, and clothes were hardly ever completely dry. Moisture seeped into clothes, collected on surfaces, and seeped through stone walls. The fragrance of wool is persistently earthy, rich in lanolin, and slightly sour. Imagine breathing in warm, but never quite fresh, cloth as you pulled the covers up to your chin. Add the smell of rushes and straw to this. They were everywhere, on mattresses, on floors, and they hardly ever remained clean. Rushes quickly became musty after being trodden by boots, saturated by spills, and inhabited by mice. At first, straw mattresses smelled like grass, but after several weeks of use, they smelled of sweat and deterioration. Another whiff of that earthy scent filled the air with every turn in bed. Intriguingly, a 14th century cookbook suggested adding meadow, lavender, rosemary, or dry herbs to rushes to make the space sweeter. It worked for a few days. They were enough obscured by the aroma to appear polite as it blended with the stronger smell. However, the old rush's sourness reappeared as the herbs wilted and were crushed underfoot, their aroma disappearing. And there was the smell of humanity. There was continual perspiration, little hygiene, and little bathing. Layers of garments were used for sleeping, absorbing the smell of the day, wool, leather, and dirty skin. This was made worse by beds that were shared by friends or family. It was either reassuring or oppressive to breathe in the stench of other people's bodies while in a medieval chamber. The extent to which these odors were actually overpowering is a matter of contention among academics. Some contend that because they were used to being exposed all the time, medieval people hardly noticed. Others think that because their contemporaries were so conscious, they placed such a great value on incense, herbs, and scents. The latter is suggested by evidence found in medical books and inventories. People took action to combat the bad air, complained about it, and looked for solutions. Smell was not secondary, as the discussion itself tells us. It was essential to how people slept in the Middle Ages. Now put yourself in a room like that. Only the acrid tang of smoke remains when the fire has burned low. Your chin is itched by the wet wool blanket. Every time you shift, the straw beneath you lets out a musty breath. Mice are scuttling among crumbs, and the rushes on the floor rustle softly. The person next to you lets out a breath, warm but laden with drink and perspiration. A hint of rosemary that was sprinkled a few days ago floats above it all, just covering the stew of stench. The sensory reality is too much to handle. It lodges itself in your mind by pressing against your nose and lungs. You try to breathe shallowly, cough, and rearrange the covers till you fall asleep. This was typical. This was life. On a smaller basis, peasants had similar experiences. Since animals frequently shared the same building, the smell of livestock invaded their dwellings. Villagers recognized the strong smell as a necessary component of living, while city dwellers found it intolerable due to the contribution of cows, sheep, and chickens. However, herbs were used here as well. Mint or chamomile bunches may be hung from rafters, in part for aroma and in part to repel pests. Incense and scents sometimes made things better for nobility. The air was sweetened by incense burning in braziers, though it mixed strangely with moisture and smoke. In an otherwise suffocating atmosphere, pockets of pleasant aroma were produced by dabbing perfumed oils over clothing or linens. However, the basic stench of medieval living permeated even the most opulent chamber. Therefore, don't think of clean linen and clean air when you image yourself sleeping in a castle. Instead, imagine a mixture of perspiration, herbs, animals, damp wool, smoke, and straw. You were reminded of where you lived and what you had to go through every night. Medieval slumber was as much influenced by smell as it was by fire or blankets. And maybe with time, there was a certain comfort in the familiarity of those scents. To breathe home was to breathe smoke, wool, and straw. Scent was more than just an annoyance for sleepers in the Middle Ages. Every night's fantasy was interwoven with identity. After the musty straw, moist wool, and smoke, a different power kept medieval people alive at night: drinks and food. Even while you might not consider dinner to be a part of sleep, the warmth that your meal provided before bed was just as important as any blanket. Hearty pottages, thick soups of barley, peas, and root vegetables cooked slowly in large cauldrons were the mainstay of homes during the winter. These meals left the body feeling heavy and full, which made it easier to handle the cold. You were persuaded that you could survive a bit longer in a cold chamber by the broth's heat, which lingered in your stomach and spread outward. While peasants relied on onions, cabbage, and whatever scraps were available, a wealthy household may enhance the dish with meat, spices, or cream. A peculiar passage in an English text from the 15th century suggests that eating leeks at night will warm the stomach and ward off the chill of death. Whether such assertion was accurate, it demonstrates how closely people associated food with survival and comfort. A hot dinner was more than just sustenance. From the inside out, it was insulation. Drinks were just as significant. The most prevalent was AE, consumed by both wealthy and poor people. Served warm in the winter, it was calorie-dense and hydrating. Hypoca, or spiced wine, became popular among nobility. Gently cooked and seasoned with cloves from distant regions, ginger, and cinnamon. Imagine drinking such a beverage in a smoky room, the sweetness searing in your throat, the smell of exotic spices blending with ash and wool, and you'll be warm and sleepy. The king's physician even suggested drinking hot mead at night to keep the bones from being chilled, according to a record from the court of Charles V, 6th of France. Though medieval medicine cloaked it in humoral theory, the idea that warm, wet beverages balanced the body's internal fluids, the concept was similar to our contemporary practice of sipping tea before bed. How much alcohol actually contributed to warmth versus just creating the appearance of it is still up for contention among academics. Ale and wine, according to some, dimmed perception, causing sleepers to think they were warmer than they actually were. Others highlight the drink's actual nutritional value, which did give them energy during long, chilly evenings. The truth might lie somewhere in the middle, a blend of psychological comfort and real warmth. Imagine yourself getting ready for bed now. You are given a wooden mold wine cup by a servant. Your nose is filled with waves of spicy perfume as the surface steams. As the liquid slides down your throat, it glows as you sip. Your muscles relax and your eyes become heavy. The covers feel more welcoming and less confining when you eventually get into bed, as if the warmth were already within you. The ceremony was less complicated, yet just as significant for peasants. The stomach was lined with a bowl of hot porridge made with barley or oats. With their bodies nourished for the long night ahead, families gathered around the fire to eat, their faces glimmering in the light. Before cuddling up under blankets, kids licked the last of the remnants from wooden spoons. They were able to overlook the drafts coming through the shutters because they remembered the warmth of meals. It was a weird folk notion that frostbite might be avoided by eating garlic before bed. The habit persisted, whether it was because garlic was warming to the palate or because it actually benefited circulation. In colder climates, farmers would occasionally eat garlic cloves before lying down, and the powerful aroma would fill the room as strongly as wool or smoke. Medieval bedtime cuisine creates a fascinating sensory world. The fragrance of herbs and spices blending with damp rushes, the bubbling cauldron, the hiss of wine heating over the fire, and the weight of stew in the stomach. The battle against cold involved every flavor, so don't conceive of medieval sleep as distinct from the preceding meal. Food served as warmth, fuel, and even medicine. Without it, the night lasted longer, the blankets were thinner, and the cold was more intense. The body suffered along with it. Each spoonful and swallow served as an additional layer of protection, an imperceptible but crucial inner blanket against the icy stone surrounding you. Now consider the most vulnerable individuals in a medieval castle: the elderly and the children. Their bodies frequently took the brunt of winter's brutality since they were less able to withstand the cold. A kid might wake up slack-lipped, and an elderly woman might not wake up at all if a healthy adult knight or servant shivered through the night. These organizations relied on additional care, group support, and occasionally pure luck to survive. Children rarely had their own quarters, according to household records from aristocratic families. Rather, they slept with maids or in nurseries near the warmth of kitchens. In training, young pages and squires would frequently share quarters with one another, their talk and laughter muffled at night by covers. The reasoning was straightforward. Heat increased with the number of bodies. In particular, babies were wrapped in layers upon layers of wool and linen. The newborn was protected from the cold air by the warmth of the mother's body in a cradle that stood close to the hearth, or in certain situations inside the mother's bed. In one moving story from a chronicle from the 14th century, a noble kid is laid by the fire in a wicker cot that is covered with a canopy and wrapped in furs. The detail illustrates how far families would go to keep their children safe. Nevertheless, many people died from disease and the cold. Parents in the Middle Ages constantly feared that a kid would be abducted by winter. Older people were at similar risk. Weak bodies endured fewer drafts and generated less heat. Grandparents tended to sleep closest to the fire in peasant huts, while younger individuals were content to sleep farther away. During the colder months, elderly family members were relocated into kitchens or smaller rooms in castles. An interesting letter from Burgundy describes an old matron who insisted on sleeping in the bakehouse, claiming that the oven's residual heat gave her a second lease of life. During that time, medical texts frequently recommended extra precautions for both young and old patients. To strengthen the humors, doctors advise patients to consume mulled beverages or place warm stones wrapped in linen at their feet. A stark reminder of how vulnerable these groups were, they warned that abrupt chills may put out the flame of life. Whether medieval families lavished particular care on children and elders or just included them into the same survival techniques as everyone else is still up for debate among historians. Some contend that the focus on keeping children safe is a sign of profound empathy. Others note that mortality rates continued to be high, implying that there were limits to what families could actually do. People's perceptions of age and childhood were influenced by the conflict between caring and inevitable outcomes. Now picture a peasant cottage on a winter's night. Tightly wrapped, a baby's small face is hardly discernible. By the fireplace, a granny snores peacefully, her cheeks turned hot from the dim illumination of the fire. In order to give them the warmest areas, parents tuck cloaks over both. On a straw mattress, children huddle together and giggle until they are too tired to continue. The smell of wool, smoke, and porridge permeates the room, but the warmth of familial unity persists. The image is different, yet no less striking in a castle. An infant whimpers against the cold as a nursemaid hums quietly while rocking a cradle close to the fire. A servant throws hot stones at the feet of an elderly noblewoman who demands that her bed curtains be drawn tight. Fearful of the creeping hand of the cold, she clutches a rosary and murmurs prayers. The youngest and oldest need the most care in both realms, and sometimes that's not enough. The sensory detail is remarkable. When logs are added to the fire, they crackle. The gentle sound of swaddling fabric rustling, an elderly man's weaving adjusted beneath covers. You sense the air's vulnerability, as if the cold is waiting for an opportunity to attack. Therefore, Keep in mind that not everyone had the same amount of sleep during the Middle Ages. The most vulnerable were children and the elderly, whose existence depended on other people's warmth. Every blanket, every ember, and every hushed prayer were important during those long nights. They serve as a reminder that sleep in the Middle Ages was not just about individual perseverance, but also about community, with both young and old being supported through the winter by the watchfulness and care of others around them. Not simply skin and bone were harmed by the cold, it influenced how people saw health in general. For a medieval mind, cold meant more than just being uneasy. It was risky, a force capable of upsetting the internal equilibrium of the body and promoting illness. The doctrine of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile was central to medicine during this time. Additionally, doctors think that temperature was a key factor in maintaining the balance of those fluids. Your humors congealed from too much cold, obstructing your body and causing you to become sick. Advice on how to deal with this issue at night can be found in medical treatises from the 13th and 14th centuries. In order to open the pores and release the damaging cold, one guidebook advised applying heated oil on the feet before going to bed. Another advocated consuming hot milk with honey, saying it calmed the stomach and prevented the humors from becoming lethargic. Physicians prescribed heat in all its forms, as well as food, drink, clothes, and even closeness to other people, since they saw warmth as medicine in and of itself. An intriguing account exists of a French surgeon who cautioned that sleeping in damp rooms could cause melancholy by cooling the black bile. He suggested hanging tapestries for medical reasons rather than aesthetic reasons. Imagine hearing from your doctor that you may become depressed if you don't appropriately adorn your walls. It demonstrates the close connection between medicine and climate. Folk remedies flourished at the same time. Some individuals thought that applying garlic or onion to the soles of the feet before bed would keep colds from getting within. Others wrapped wine-soaked wool charms around their wrists. An odd prescription from an English herbalist suggests keeping a live rooster in the bedroom to ward off human frost. It's unclear if anyone actually slept with a squawking chicken close by, but the idea shows how desperate people were for solutions. The effectiveness of medieval health treatments against the cold is still up for debate among modern experts. Some contend that herbal medicines, warm beverages, and oils did offer some minor relief by improving circulation and providing psychological solace. Others maintain that the majority of these therapies were merely symbolic and provided little more than a placebo. The argument is still ongoing. However, there is little doubt that individuals firmly believed in the efficacy of these evening customs. Now picture yourself getting ready for bed based on such guidance. A servant rubs warm oil onto your feet while you sit by the fireplace. The room was filled with the scent of rosemary. It coats your throat when you sip a tiny cup of hot wine that has been sweetened with honey. In order to prevent frost, a weird and strong spring rig of garlic is placed close to the bed. Believing that these cures will keep your humors in balance till dawn, you get into bed. It's a powerful sensory experience. The sharp sting of garlic in the air, the sweet flavor of honeyed wine, the smooth warmth of oil on your skin. Every little thing serves as a reminder that sleep was not just a fight against pain, but also a medical procedure, a nightly treatment against the possibility of imbalance. Even peasants had their own solutions. For children, women made herbal teas with chamomile or nettle because they thought the warmth would keep coughs at bay. To maintain good circulation, men wrapped vinegar-soaked wool over their legs. These customs made it difficult to distinguish between science and superstition in cottages. But in a society where sickness frequently seemed unavoidable, they gave people agency. Naturally, the irony is that many illnesses originated from the same tactics employed to fight off colds. Smoke from fires clogged lungs, joint pain was caused by heavy blankets, and filth was gathered by oily ointments. But to medieval thinking, the danger of frost leaking into the body outweighed these small expenses. Coughing in a smoky room is preferable to freezing in a clean one. Therefore, keep in mind that medieval sleep involved more than merely enduring discomfort. It was encircled by health theories, both familiar and unfamiliar cures, and a persistent fear that the cold may tip the scales of life itself. It was a medical event every night. Every blanket and herb served as a prescription, every ember as a remedy, and falling asleep meant having faith that your efforts would be sufficient to see you through to the next day. There were evenings when charms, blankets, fires, and herbs were insufficient. When you enter a castle chamber in the dead of winter, you may notice something eerie: frost growing on the interior walls. Imagine waking up to discover your wash basin frozen solid, or lying in bed and seeing a lovely lace of ice tracing the stones. Inside, the water became a glassy block. Instead of remaining courteously outside, the cold entered and used its own ruthless artistic talent to decorate rooms. Chroniclers document instances in which whole households awoke to the sight of frost on their bed linens. In a letter, a noblewoman described how the mist from her own breath had crystallized overnight, causing her canopy to shimmer as if it were stitched with silver. It sounds lyrical to us. She saw it as depressing evidence of how uninhabitable even a well-furnished room may be. These stories are supported by archaeological data. Moisture stains and light salt streaks in some intact castles indicate how water condensed on the walls and flooring. Without insulation, frost formed as warm interior air collided with frozen stone. Every night, the ice returned after servants scraped it away in the morning. An interesting story from Scandinavia has survived. Icicles grew on indoor rafters in several hallways, dripping onto unfortunate sleepers below. A crude fix for an unsettling issue, servants strung cloths to capture the meltwater. Imagine falling asleep, listening to the slight crack of ice overhead, and wondering if a piece of it will land on your bed. The prevalence of this phenomenon is still up for debate among academics. Some people think that only in Northern Europe, where winters were harsher, was frost common indoors. Some contend that inadequately heated stone rooms quickly reached freezing temperatures, even in temperate climates. It might be both. There was always a chance of waking up to ice in your chamber, albeit severity differed by location. Now imagine yourself in that circumstance. Breath fogging in the air, you awaken in the gloomy gray of dawn. The bed curtains have frozen crystal edges and are inflexible. Your fingers come into contact with ice rather than water when you go for the wash basin. The idea of leaving the covers feels like punishment, and your joints hurt from the cold. The brittle creak of wood, that has been slowed down by frost, the stinging sting of frozen linen against your flesh, and the quiet that is only disturbed by the slight trickle of melting ice are all intense sensory details. Peasants faced the same issue, but in different ways. During the night, frost drifted down like snow and covered the inside of thatch and rafters in cottages. There were occasions when kids woke up with frost stuck to their hair. Sleeping with the clouds inside was a gloomy joke among parents. However, the difficulty could not be covered up by humor. It was followed by respiratory sickness, chilblains, and frostbite. Despite their wealth, nobles were unable to completely avoid it. The body was kept alive by hot stones and furs, but the air was still hostile. The psychological toll is hinted at in diaries, where people describe hating getting out of bed in the morning and feeling trapped by their covers, because the room outside is too harsh to confront. Even the metaphor of love as a bed without frost inside the hangings was used by one English poet. For him, genuine closeness required producing warmth, where the world gave nothing but ice and resisting the nighttime cold. It demonstrates how profoundly the feeling of frost influenced both reality and imagination. Thus, when contemplating medieval sleep, keep in mind the fantastical splendor of those evenings when the walls were adorned with frost. Living in a castle meant sharing a room with ice and being reminded every morning that frost and stone were allies against your comfort. Even still, they braved mornings that felt just as severe within as they did outdoors, scraping ice away, layering blankets, and whispering prayers. Imagine yourself on a road, far from rooms you know, rather than in a castle this time. Traveling during the Middle Ages was hazardous, difficult, and sluggish, and the issue of temperature became even more pressing as night fell. Castles had tapestries and fires, while travelers, pilgrims, merchants, and roving knights had to find shelter wherever they could, which typically meant inside. Peasants had their household hearths. The quaint picture postcard that you might have imagined was not the medieval inn. Rather, it was frequently a wooden building with a smoke-filled corridor, packed rooms, and mattresses that were shared by strangers. There may be no privacy, blankets stretched thin, and guests crammed 3 or 4 to a mattress. Nevertheless, it supplied one essential element: heat. Everyone could see the fire in the main hall, and the heat was magnified by the gathered bodies. In the 15th century, a traveler in Italy lamented that the beds were teeming with rodents, but he acknowledged that at least he was kept warm by the companionship of other travelers. Imagine squeezing up next to 2 strangers on a straw mattress, while the smell of ale and perspiration fills your nostrils. Yes, it's unpleasant, but at least your toes made it through the night. Additionally, there were odder lodgings. Guests slept in stables because some inns were so ill-equipped. Although it may appear demeaning at first, several travelers actually liked it. Warmth emanated from horses and cattle, and a stable full with animals may be far more comfortable than a chilly room upstairs. On the Camino de Santiago, pilgrims sometimes wrote about deliberately selecting stalls, cuddling up against hay bales with livestock, and letting their breath mix with the animals. It smelled strongly, yet there was no denying the heat. Hospitality adhered to more traditional customs in more remote places. Travelers, particularly pilgrims or those bearing religious emblems, were supposed to be welcomed into the village. A peasant household may provide a place on a straw pallet or by the fire. Here, warmth comes from intimacy and kindness rather than from opulence. You would lie next to strangers with the fragrance of stew still permeating the rafters as you listened to the crackle of a modest hearth. A strange document from a French village in the 14th century recounts communal inns where dozens of passengers, including men and women, bedded side by side on large wooden platforms covered in straw. Even though it was common back then, the thought of strangers crammed close could make us uneasy now. Any uneasiness was overshadowed by the warmth shared. Researchers debate whether these accommodations were more comfortable than castles. Some contend that they did maintain warmth better than large noble chambers, despite being crowded and unclean. Others draw attention to the risks of lice, fleas, and robbery, while others argue that despite the cold, castle life at least provided protection. Both viewpoints are legitimate. In order to survive, the tired medieval traveler frequently had to choose between uncomfortable crowds and frigid seclusion. Put yourself in one of these situations now. A cacophony of voices and fire greets you as you enter the hall. You can smell the aroma of roasted meat, smoke, and ale. You cram yourselves in next to strangers on a straw pallet that has been cleared. Dogs bark, mugs clatter, and the floor cracks, but the crowd's warmth calms your limbs. The heat of bodies pressed close, the embers flickering dimly in the hearth, is felt later when the hall is quiet and snores have taken the place of laughing. It's sufficient, even though it's not comfort as you know it. The sensory details are remarkable. The sound of straw rubbing across thin linen, the strong smell of smoke and perspiration, and the steady breathing of a dozen people sleeping. You move so as not to wake your roommate, and after a while, the sound of the inn lulls you into a required but shallow slumber. When traveling, even aristocrats had to deal with this fact. Armies of people were needed for royal progressions, and they swiftly filled up. Monarchs are reported to have taken over entire residences for their retinues or lodged in monasteries. However, the basic problem was unavoidable even for kings. The drive took away layers of affluence, and warmth was hard to come by. Thus, keep in mind the wanderer in the tapestry of medieval sleep. Every bed was a risk, every night unknown for him. Would it be the floor of a stranger's hut, a stable with horses, a pallet covered with fleas, or with luck, a guest hall in a monastery? The objective was the same wherever it was, to retain enough heat for a new day to come. Every household managed to survive, but not all of them were successful. The medieval era left behind tales, part mythology and half-truth, of people who braved frigid nights that became the subject of warnings. Sleeping in a castle meant battling an unseen foe, sometimes the icy one. Guards on a Flanders castle wall froze at their posts during a harsh winter siege, according to a gloomy 13th century account. Their teammates discovered them standing, spears in hand, and their bodies frozen solid by daybreak. As if the cold itself were a weapon of war, the chronicler recorded it not as tragedy, but as evidence of the harshness of winter. Just picture the spooky scene. Overnight, men became statues with long extinguished watch flames. There were also softer, more intimate stories. In a letter, a noblewoman from Burgundy describes how her cousin, who was visiting from Italy, shivered through the night and pleaded for daylight since he had never experienced such cold. The man lived, but the tale was recounted with amusement, making fun of his frailty and subtly admitting the horror of an apparently never-ending night. A bride who entered her new husband's castle and collapsed due to the shock of the frigid chamber is the subject of an intriguing folktale from Scandinavia. The villagers whispered that the northern ice spirits had cursed her. The story endured as a warning, regardless of whether she passed away from disease or just exposure. Winter winds and stone barriers might test even noble marriages. There is still disagreement among academics on how literally we should interpret these reports. Were they dramatic exaggerations that made commonplace adversity into legend? Or do they represent actual catastrophic losses from cold and frostbite in an era without insulation? While some think chroniclers embellish tales to teach moral lessons, others consider them as true accounts of a harsher climate than our own. Now picture yourself in a big hall listening to such stories. It burns low. The walls are dancing with shadows. Additionally, an elderly retainer relates the tale of a knight who trusted too few blankets and died while sleeping. Kids listen with keen eyes while tightening their cloaks. These tales are cautionary tales in addition to being entertaining. If you don't take the cold seriously, it will get to you. This tone of caution occasionally appeared in even traveler accounts. Pilgrims described friends who were lost on mountain routes and whose remains were found in the spring, curled up as though they were still asleep. Campaign soldiers told of comrades who remained in their sleeping rolls, their cloaks frozen solid. When temperatures plummeted, the distinction between death and sleep became too hazy. These nights have terrifying sensory details. Frost on bearskin stings, the numbness seeping into the toes and fingers. Closing your eyes and not opening them again is a terrifying thought. It was a gamble to lie down in a cold chamber. The stakes were prayers, fires, and blankets. The prize was survival. But there were also tales of perseverance mixed in with these somber ones. Peasants boasted of surviving winters in modest huts where families were kept alive by fire and closeness. Midway through the winter, nobles enjoyed hunts and feasts, demonstrating that their wealth outlasted the season. There were voices proclaiming perseverance and portraying survival as a form of victory for every story of loss. Maybe that's why stories about freezing nights continued to exist. Despite their strength, they reminded the audience that castles were not impregnable. Winter was not kept out by stone walls, but soldiers were. And like the poorest peasant, even the most powerful ruler relied on blankets, fires, and friends throughout the long, dark hours. So, keep both facts in mind when you picture medieval slumber. The silent victories of those who persevered, and the tales of those who perish in the cold. There was a lesson in every story. Honor the evening. Take precautions against the cold, and never presume that you will survive. Finally, you went back to the fireplace. Every medieval sleeper was enchanted by this sign. The fire was never merely an instrument. It served as the center of the home. On winter nights, the line between life and death. As the flames rose and fell, its light created shadows on the walls that appeared to move like guards, moving and flickering. Sleeping in a castle was like living in a conversation with fire. You were afraid. It was necessary for you. Without it, you couldn't make it. Every feeling was overpowered by the presence of the hearth. The sound of oak planks snapping reverberated around the room like a heartbeat. Faint light trails were left behind as sparks shot upward and disappeared up the chimney. Hair and tapestries were covered in the stench of burning resin. Your back froze, and your face was baked by the uneven waves of heat. The hearth was a dichotomy, a lifesaver and a smoky despot, a tormentor and a savior. Fire was praised by nobility as a symbol of prestige. A blazing hearth signified wealth and the power to order servants to gather an infinite supply of fuel, clear woods when needed, and maintain flames throughout the night. Some homes even hired specialized attendants, known as fire wardens, whose only responsibility was to keep the embers burning. Allowing the hearth to get cold was a dishonor, not just an annoyance. However, the poorest people also gathered with the same respect around their modest fires. As they watched flames lick at rough logs, peasants crouched on earthen floors, gathered with animals and family. They passed bowls of stew, prayed, laughed, and recounted stories. Although theirs lacked the opulence of carved stone hearths, the comfort was just as genuine. Fire brought people together and allowed for sleep in both the castle and the hamlet. Before going to bed, the villagers round the hearth and extend their hands toward it, saying blessings as if the flames themselves were sacred, according to an intriguing story from a tourist in Germany. They felt that the fire protected them while they slept by carrying their dreams into the night. It shows how ritual became a fog of practical need. In addition to providing warmth, the fire represented spirit, memory, and faith. The extent to which this veneration was symbolic versus pragmatic is still a topic of debate among historians. Some claim it was just a custom-dressed survival instinct. Some contend that fire was a really spiritual energy that was included into everyday prayer and cosmology. Both might be true. People in the Middle Ages lived in close proximity to danger, which made fire more than just fuel. It took on significance. Now, take one more look at your imagined palace. The blankets are stacked high, and the bed curtains are pulled. The towers are whipped by the wind outside. The night closes in with all its weight as snow hisses against shutters. However, embers continue to burn in the enormous hearth, their dim light seeping through curtain cracks. Knowing they are the thin line keeping the frost at away, you close your eyes and listen to the low moan of flames. The whole sensory experience is finished. Your tongue still tastes like smoke, the feel of fur and wool on your chest. A dog cuddled up at your feet, providing warmth. The sound of a prayer reverberating in your mind. Knowing that sleep in the Middle Ages was never simple or certain, but always battled for with every trick, custom, and scrap of warmth available, you drift toward dreams. Castles ultimately served as strongholds against people, but never against the elements. Resilience, creativity, and community, rather than steel or stone, were what kept their populations alive. Layering blankets, exchanging heat, using fuel, and holding on to hope were all necessary to survive the night. Humanity itself turned into the real fire against the never-ending cold of the medieval night. Let's slow down now. Imagine the embers flickering softly, like coals resting, after a long day of work, their light no longer ferocious but soothing. The rush of wind outside the walls has faded to a far-off hum, and the room is still. You're pressed into the mattress by the thick, sheltering weight of the blankets. The struggle with the cold, the watchfulness of flames, the barking of servants and dogs. It all disappears, like if you've drawn a veil over the entire universe. Your breathing becomes slower. Every breath has a subtle wool and smoke flavor. The calm air carries each sigh. The sounds of monks chanting, shutters rattling, and boots on stone that once reverberated have been reduced to whispers. The castle itself appears to be asleep, its stones promising calm. Imagine yourself secure in your cocoon. The dog shifts and sighs at your feet. Darkness envelops you like a blanket when the final candle goes out. Yes, the cold still exists, but you no longer struggle against it. Knowing that sleep is a precarious truce, you accept it as others who came before you did. The night makes you feel heavier. Shapes and colors emerge from thoughts. Like frost melting in the sun, the medieval world, with all its cold and smoke, fades into the distance. All that's left is silence. You're sufficiently exhausted, safe, and toasty. The narrative ends there. The bed cradles you, the hearth flickers, and the long night lulls you into dreams. Wrapped in silent resiliency, they rest now as they once did. Dreams, sweet dreams.